across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, good evening to you. This is Talk and it's Petrie here as usual on Wednesday, and I will be here until 1 o'clock on Thursday morning as usual. Now, coming up at midnight is the phone in, and it is your opportunity to have your say, for your opportunity to talk back so that you get a chance, and it's the full hour. By the way, it's the whole hour. There's no guests, there's just you and me. So what I want to talk to you about is the NHS. And I want to talk to you about, in a moment I'm going to be talking about whether the NHS in its current form has possibly got any kind of longevity, or what it would take for the NHS to survive the next 10 years, the next 20 years, and is the answer to it just throwing money at it? Well, today the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has said that what he was going to do is start shuffling money around. So he's going to send more money to poorer working class areas, in the hope to improve the health outcomes of people in those areas. And I want to know whether you think that that is something that would work. Is this just a case of more money? What is it that's going on in those working class areas, those poorer areas that see a worse health outcome? Things like prostate cancer, 1 in 5 from those men in those areas get diagnosed too late. It's 1 in 8 in big cities. So what is going on with diagnosis, with GPs, in the rural areas? I'm going to have to rely on you for this, because I've lived in a city, for the last 30 odd years. So, for me, the NHS is what it is in London, right? And I feel like I'm relatively well looked after. Actually, I've got an excellent GP surgery who are beyond diligent and wonderful, and I'm very, very lucky in that. But I'd like to get a measure from you as to what it's like outside of those big urban centres, what it's like outside in the countryside, maybe in rural Scotland or rural Wales. I know that your health is paid for in a different metric, in a different way, because we have NHS England. But I'd still like to know how the NHS is doing in Wales, for example. I hear that it's fairly disastrous, and how it's going in Scotland as well. So I'd love to hear from you. And is moving this money around, do you think, going to make a difference to your area? I'd love to talk to you about that. So please do give me a call, one way or the other. We've all got some experience of the NHS, whether it's just for health checkups or whether it's for something more serious. Have you been let down? Have your surgery been cancelled again and again? What is going on with you and your relationship to the NHS? Give me a call, please. 0344 499 1000. You can text me as well if you put the word talk and then your message to 87222. You can WhatsApp on the same number as the phone number, 0344 499 1000, and send a short voice note to that number as well. So all of that is coming up at midnight. Before that, we head to Scotland for the fabulous John Boothman, political correspondent of the Sunday Times in Scotland, to have a look through the papers for Thursday. Andy Lound will be here, our favourite space expert, to run us through things up in the stars. And Fletcher, the futurist, will be here to talk about the threat that AI poses to news content. It is absolutely significant, really, really important topic, so we'll be talking about that as well. But first, coming up, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has announced new funding measures as part of a 10-year NHS plan, just as the BMA said that doctors are excited at the prospect of going back out on strike over pay. Now, last year they got 22%, these so-called junior doctors. They want to change the name to resident doctors, because we always think of junior doctors as being young, but they're not. They're just people who haven't specialised. So resident doctor is probably a better description. So these resident doctors got 22% last year. They've been offered 5.4% on top of that this year, which they are rejecting. They would like a further 29%. So they're going to be balloting to come out on strike, and they are excited about that. Well, Wes Streeting's plans include overhauling GP funding so that poorer areas get more GPs and more per patient, because the health needs are often greater, so you'll get more per patient in those areas. But is more funding the only issue with the NHS? We keep throwing more and more and more money at this behemoth. It never seems to be enough. So how much would be enough? 300 billion? We're nearly at 200 billion. 400 billion? What would be enough? What is the future of the NHS in its current form? You've got people like Reform circling to sell it off. So what will happen to the NHS, and what do we need to do to get a grip on it before we lose this treasured pillar of our society? Well, Stefan Stern joins me now, a management expert and professor at Bayes Business School and author, his latest book, The Lady Macbeth Guide to Ambition. Brilliant title. Good to see you. Thank you, Stefan, for joining me.
It's a pleasure.
It's a real conundrum, the NHS, isn't it? Because we don't want to lose it. But I think if you said to every single one of us, look, you're going to have to pay a couple of grand extra a year in tax to fund it, there would be people who said, look, we already pay national insurance, we already pay a lot of tax. It never seems to be enough money. What is the first central problem that you see with the NHS?
I think there are lots of problems actually, aren't there? But one is that we're still in that post-COVID recovery moment. I think we've perhaps forgotten already just how overwhelming that was, not just for us as a country, but for the NHS in particular. I mean, the word trauma is overused perhaps, but I think in this case, probably not, when we know about the shortage of PPE, for example, that confrontation with death. No one went into the health service to deal with so many dead bodies in such a short space of time. People were exhausted. I think there's a long-term consequence of that. Also, waiting lists, inevitably all sorts of procedures not happening because of COVID, and then industrial action. So if you chuck those three things together, I think there's still a recovery phase, a readjustment phase going on, frankly. That was part of the point of the pay settlement with the formerly junior, now resident doctors, and why perhaps in the public there'll be some impatience with the idea that they want to come back with another much higher than inflation pay claim, when, you know, some of the catching up that was absolutely necessary was dealt with quite recently. Yeah,
it was dealt with almost immediately, wasn't it, by the Chancellor when they came into power. But even at that point, the doctors said, no, we still want what's owed to us. We're still going to come back for more. And everyone went, no, they won't do that. But listen, the reason I wanted to speak to somebody as yourself who is business minded is because if we look at the NHS as a business, where you've got over 50% of your income being spent on salaries, for example, your customers are dissatisfied and even choosing to go to a different company, if you like, privately, to get their health care because everything is slowing down. If this was a business, it would be put into administration, wouldn't it?
You'd certainly be having quite a serious look at what was going on. That wage bill is not unusual for any large organisation, of course, that most companies pay 50, 60, 70% of their costs in wages. And of course, we also, as we use the word customer, but of course we're not paying at the point of delivery of the service. So while we have high expectations of customer service from the good bits of the private sector, the companies that we like dealing with, when it's the NHS, we're actually dealing with a different sort of organisation. We hope they're going to pay attention to us. We hope we'll get their attention promptly. But we know that also the demand is infinite and that there will be a queue and we will have to wait. And that is partly the point of the NHS. And maybe some politicians haven't been quite brave enough to make that clear to us over the years. There's another word that they don't ever dare to use, and that's rationing. But by definition, when the supply of something is limited, is finite, and the demand is almost infinite and unpredictable, then of course there has to be an element of rationing. That's what the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, NICE, is all about. They decide which drugs, some of them very, very expensive, they can make a case for providing in the NHS and which they can't. And it gets very controversial and upsetting for families and so on. But that's also, the NICE is explicitly introduced by Frank Dobson way back in the last Labour government. That's explicitly really a rationing body. And so we do know somehow that the NHS is not like going to the high street and buying things. Those of us who can afford to, which is not that many people, but some, are choosing, as you say, to use private healthcare, either insurance or buying individual treatment, attention from private GPs and so on. That, in a way, relieves some of the demand. And those people might very well say, well, I pay tax, I'm paying twice with my private, but they're able to, and they're choosing to, and that's all part of the mix. So it's a complicated story. It's not quite like a business, is really what I'm trying to say. It's a public service, and these are needs, the health needs of the nation, rather than private sector wants. We want things from the high street, consumer goods, holidays, cars, whatever, clothes, health, and for most people, education are really public needs. They're public goods rather than private goods.
But if we look at the NHS, and I've even got studies here from the staff, and many of the staff complained that it's either poorly managed or overly managed. And the reason I was trying to draw a parallel with a business is to say, look, if this was a business, you wouldn't overstuff. I mean, the BBC is the same. I've worked there. I can tell you, they're all clipboard Johnnies running around with clipboard. They don't actually achieve anything. They're just managers. They've usually been promoted out of the way, right? So they're earning more money. And a company that relied on profits, for example, I know the NHS doesn't, they would never do that. They would never have that layer of almost useless management. But the public sector does. And it's also completely, completely out of its mind over procurement. Those things big businesses do extremely well because they know they've got massive buying power. They know that they can really squeeze prices and make sure they're getting really good value for what they're buying. Whereas the NHS, you've got some places 3p a syringe, some places 25p. It just seems to me that is absolutely wrong and a waste of our money.
Well, I think you're right to look at management, because this is a management challenge, whether it's public or private. It's about management, about the organisation of work, and yes, things like procurement. And crucially, this thing that in the jargon we sometimes call knowledge management, but in plain terms, how can the NHS know what the NHS knows, if you know what I mean? Why is it that there are pockets of excellence, absolutely, all over the UK? Some fantastic things going on in the NHS every day, and we know that because sometimes people are nice enough to talk about it and say that they personally have had a very good experience, successful treatment, procedure and so on, back home and back to work. But there's also problems. There is a paradox in the opinion poll data, actually, because people often say in the same answer, well, actually, my family and I was treated well, but it's terrible what's happening to the NHS, isn't it? Because there's a collective sense of things going wrong. And that's partly because, yes, absolutely, just as there are pockets of excellence, there are also long waiting lists. We heard Wes Streeting talking also about maternity services, for example, earlier this week. And that too, there are some really upsetting, difficult, terrible stories actually in parts of the maternity services around the country. So why can't something called the NHS, N for national, the clue is in the name, why can't it actually collectively share the knowledge of best practice and get organised and, yes, perhaps streamline some of that management? We see that NHS England, one of the many bodies, is being abolished because there was a duplication of work between NHS England and the Department of Health. But as you know, if you've covered this, we've got NHS employers, NHS providers, NHS Confederation in Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland. There's devolved management of NHS. So what is it really? What is this organisation? Does it really work? It's also had so many reorganisations, and you and I are old enough to remember restructurings, reorganisations, so-called competition being brought into a public service, which was, I think, questionable from the very outset. All of it, and they're exhausted. That's another element I didn't chuck into my list of problems at the beginning. They've been reorganised almost to death. and they don't need that, but they could do with them streamlining and urgently sharing of best practice.
Yeah, I mean, we've had them sort of being, they need to be more independent from government, and it seems now that Wes Streeting is pulling the NHS back into centralisation. Remember all the trusts that were set up that were supposed to look after their areas. I mean, all of this piles more and more consultants, I don't mean medical consultants, but business consultants, different types of consultants, on top of each other at enormous cost. I mean, the wasted money that must have been spent in this idea, trying to figure out what the NHS is just extraordinary. Do you think it would be better if it was taken outside of politics almost, if it was said, look, this is very specific, we need to run this on a 20-year programme, it's got to be a cross-party, it's not going to change every 5 years?
Well, that's an interesting thought. And of course, we've looked at that in the past, at things like social care and long-term care, and it's gone wrong because politics has intervened. So Andy Burnham, when he was Health Secretary in 2009, thought he had an agreement on long-term care. And lo and behold, in the general election a few months later, that was called Labour's death tax by the Conservatives. So you're absolutely right. It would be good to take it out of politics. The one popular tax rise in living memory was a penny on the national insurance, employer national insurance, introduced by Gordon Brown at the start of the millennium, when he had commissioned someone called Derek Wanless to do the Wanless report into the need. And of course, Labour was much more popular then. The economy was growing. People felt a bit better off than they do today. And they managed to sell, against Number 10's instincts, by the way, sell a tax rise explicitly linked, or again in the jargon, hypothecated, sorry for that rude language at this time of night, to link it to health expense. And it hasn't been a popular tax rise ever since, and it was something of a one-off. You mentioned that earlier. Could we argue for, in a sort of apolitical sense, saying, look, here's the cost, this is what it's going to take. Most of you, just like 93% of people use state schools, similar sort of percentage use the NHS and don't use private health or insurance. They might get a deal with their employer if they're lucky, but most of you are going to use the NHS. This is what it's going to cost, and that's going to mean a penny, 2 pennies back on the basic rate. Very, very hard to sell politically, and yet we also know, as you said in your introduction, that the costs potentially infinite, partly because of the advances of treatments of pharmaceuticals and wonderful things that keep us alive longer. It's a problem of success, we could say, to try and be positive. Longevity, improving health by and large, not, as Wes Streeting was saying, in some of the poorer parts of the country, but by and large life expectancy as an average going up, and that's creating problems. There are cost problems, but as you say, with the general elections coming every 4 and 5 years, very hard for politicians to really tell us the whole truth about this and then get re-elected. Can
the NHS, it feels to me like stumbling on, just throwing, whenever there's an issue, just throw some more money at it. Wes Streeting promised a root and branch look at this. He said he would root out waste. He said that he would figure it out. I don't see much evidence he talks about it a lot, but I don't know whether there's much evidence to back that up. But if something radical isn't done, is this organisation going to survive?
Oh, yes, I think it will survive, and partly because of those political reasons that you've been touching on. I mean, Nigel Lawson, the old former Chancellor of the Exchequer, did say that, never mind the Church of England, he said the NHS was the closest thing the country had to a national religion. And we do all think it's going to be there for us. That's partly why it's so disappointing. I'm glad to hear that your GP practice is working well. I have to say mine, I'm afraid, is not. And I'm very familiar with those tales of the 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. rush to the phone, and you get through 10 seconds in and you're already number 20 in the queue. And by the way, the recorded message is, try tomorrow, good luck, we're already full for the day. I mean, that's when you feel as a citizen and a taxpayer that the NHS is somehow not really there for you anymore. You can't quite access it. And so, but we have high expectations of it, I think rightly, because, as I say, every day, all over the country, amazing and wonderful things are happening in it too. And that's why we care so much. And that's why I think politically it's impossible to let it go. And that's why I think initially Labour, made quite a strong point when they said, OK, here's the employer national insurance rise, 20-odd billion into the NHS urgently, bring down waiting lists, bring down those waiting times, try and get back to where we were, 15, 20 years ago, when the NHS was really performing much better on the whole and was really, really admired and popular and admired by the population. So I think it's just too precious to be allowed to die, but that's going to make things harder for other parts of the public sector, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, you do have some politicians circling. I mentioned there, Nigel Farage has made no secret of the fact that he thinks it's too big, it's too unwielding, and it's too expensive. There may be a way of persuading some of the people in this country that maybe another model would work better. And that's what worries me, because I do think that we do have a real diamond here. But, you know, the more it's seen to be failing, or talking about it failing, the more people will think, oh, well, it's time to put that to sleep now and try something different.
Well, I think free at the point of use is still a precious principle that people will want to protect. But I suppose we need, and I think Streeting is talking about this, we do need, and after all, New Labour did this, and this is how they got waiting lists down 20 years ago, that using extra capacity from private sector providers, even though for the patient it's still free at the point of use, is clearly the way of getting those waiting lists down. And we shouldn't be too ideological or religious about that. It's not privatising the NHS if patients are not paying extra for cataracts and knees and hips that are delivered at scale by some private sector providers, if that's also affordable for the taxpayer. You know, that's just a way of, you know, processing this enormous demand for important interventions and services. So I think it will be doable. We don't want to be like America.
No,
you know, enormous costs, absolutely unbelievable costs.
It's practically evil, actually.
And yet, tens of millions of people really too scared to get ill, too scared to go to the emergency room.
Awful.
So we don't. Now, on the continent, there will be countries, and there are countries around the world where there's perhaps a more intelligent and effective mix of public and private, and I think that's probably where we have to go in terms of increasing capacity. But I don't think we want to go down the co-payment route, as it's called, where some are paying more for a sort of superior NHS and there's a poor NHS for poor people. No. I don't think we want to get into that.
No, well, you don't want to get anywhere near what they're doing in America, and nowhere near. I hear far too many horror stories about the levels of debt. Stefan, fascinating to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. I really enjoyed that. Stefan Stern there, management expert, professor at Bayes Business School and author of, his latest book is The Lady Macbeth Guide to Ambition. Right, quick break, back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi there, this is Talk and it's Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock, and it is also competition time. Here at Talk we're giving you the chance to win a pair of Oasis tickets, and it's for Manchester on July the 19th, so you've got to be quick. We'll also put you up in a hotel and give you £5,000 spending money. Now here is everything you need to know on how to enter.
Alright, kid, you have to be over 18 to enter in the UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win a pair of tickets to the most electrifying rock and roll reunion of the century, a hotel stay and £5,000 spending money, all you gotta do is text the word WIN to 83338 by Monday the 7th of July at 11 p.m. and you'll be entered into the draw to go supersonic this summer. Sorted. Right, here's all the legal stuff. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You've got to have the bill payer's permission or post your name and number to Oasis Prize Draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester, CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of July. This is a TalkSport limited promotion run on TalkSport, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full T's and C's at talksport.com.
So there you go. Get on with it quickly if you want to win those tickets. Right, coming up at midnight, it's just you and me chatting away the hour, and we'll be talking about the NHS and the fact that Wes Streeting is suggesting that more money needs to go to more working class areas because there are particular health issues in those areas, and diagnosis of cancer is lower in those areas than it is in more wealthy areas. I assume that probably means cities and urban areas are probably better serviced with the NHS. But I'm going to need you to fill me in on what it's like, even just as much as I know where I think if I were to collapse here now, there's a hospital about 2 minutes, literally just down the river from me, St Thomas's. Not a hospital I'd want to go to, frankly, but it's very, very close. Where I live, it's again, very close. I've got several hospitals near to me. So I know that I'm within sort of 10 minutes, I guess, if an emergency were to happen, of a hospital. I'm sure that isn't true of you living somewhere out in the countryside. So I'm going to need your help with that, because I haven't lived in the countryside for many, many years. And so I've got kind of used to having the NHS very close to me. My doctor's surgery is brilliant. I'm extremely well looked after. And the hospital, Charing Cross, I'm really very fond of it. Nearly got closed down, but it's a brilliant place, great staff there. So I'm very, very lucky. So I don't really kind of get the... I sort of on paper, I understand the difficulties in the countryside or in poorer working class areas. On paper, I understand that, but I don't understand it on a sort of emotional level. So I'd love to know your experiences of accessing the NHS where you live, anywhere in the country. And we'll include Wales and Scotland in that as well, even though this is an NHS England situation. But I know that in Wales it's not working as well as it should be. It hasn't done for many years. And in Scotland, I'm not quite so sure about what's going on in NHS Scotland. So let me know. Give me a call. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk, and it's Petrie here with you, just to let you know that coming up at 11 o'clock, is John Boothman. He's going to be here to take us through the newspapers for Thursday. And talking of future, Mal Fletcher joins me now, who's a futurist. Very good to see you, Mal. How are you?
I'm well, Petrie. How are you?
Good. I'm extremely well. All the better for seeing you. I can promise you that. Mel, this is really something that is so vital to the future of democracy, to the future even of civilization, and that is believing what we're told. this sort of post-truth era that we seem to be living in at the moment, with AI-generated news, with images that are extremely, confusing, that we completely. I saw one today telling me that there'd been some explosions in New York. Now, as a journalist, I'm able to go and speak to people and track things down and find out that it was absolutely not true. But it looked extremely convincing. The report was very convincing. This AI-generated news and this fake news that's out at the moment is extremely worrying, isn't it?
Yes, it is. There's all sorts of things we could talk about here, but just by way of background, you think about the speed of this change where it comes to news and access to news. In the last 20 years, or under 20 years, we've already seen two major revolutions. The one was the social media revolution. People said that would democratize news with citizen journalists. But I think more than democratization of news, it gave us the proliferation of opinion, often without any substantiating research at all. The second revolution came about 5-6 years ago when a lot of individuals started taking up platforms like YouTube to form small, in inverted commas, news organizations. And many of these individuals have no history in journalism. And right now, as you suggest, we're seeing the very early stages of a third news revolution built on the presence and power of AI. So in the next 5 to 10 years, we can expect to see things like hyper-personalized news, fully automated newscasts that use sophisticated AI in real time, remote drones beaming videos to domestic news bots, and even, I think, e-giving platforms that allow people to support victims as they watch them live. But there are some concerns, and one of the big ones is misinformation and a lack of critical perspective on the news.
I mean, you've also got people like Donald Trump calling legitimate news organisations scum, saying that they're lying, that they should be arrested. He's coming down very hard on news organisations in the US. I think he will be credited with the term fake news. Anything that doesn't agree with him is fake news. They are scumbags, they are liars, they are losers. Even stuff coming out of his own administration, that's political sabotage. Nothing is, unless it says how brilliant Trump is, it's wrong. And people are already believing that, and that really scares me. In as much as democracy, we saw it in Nazi Germany, exactly the same thing. This destruction of voices that may be the voice of calm in a storm.
Yeah, exactly right. And what he's doing is calling into question the whole idea of the citizenry trusting the media.
Yeah.
And we know, that trust is the currency on which influence is based. And it's important here that the news organizations maintain a physical presence in the midst of all the AI that's going on, because trust requires accountability and transparency, and that means a human face. Banks have discovered that, they've closed branches, they've shut down an important channel through which consumers can make complaints or ask questions. The same thing will happen with news journalism if we get to the stage where AI is allowed to replace completely faces and voices of real human beings. Because you and I know there are times when human beings want to know that the people reporting the news have the same feelings about news as the people receiving it. So I think for all of Trump's machinations, we just have to get on with promoting journalism that people can trust.
But you've got organisations like Fox, which is called Fox News. None of the presenters there are journalists. They cosplay being journalists, but they are called a news organisation. It's hardly surprising, therefore, that people do get confused. They switch on the television, it says Fox News, but you believe that there is some kind of organisation that would stop them from lying about it. It should be called Fox Entertainment, and it isn't, and they cosplay it being journalists. None of them have, as far as I know, have studied journalism. It is really scary, but you can't blame the consumer in a way for being confused about what they're seeing.
No, that's true. And I think that problem's going to get a little bit worse if we're not careful because of the hyper-personalisation that will come with AI.
Opinion, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's personalised news, though, pitched at people according to the data and what the data says about those people's tastes. So we see that with social media, but I think in the next iteration, we're going to see supposedly mainstream media organisations, trusted media organisations, doing much the same thing. And that tends to promote emotion. So there's a lot of heat, but not a lot of light on the subject, which is what journalism brings to the table.
I absolutely agree with you. There is this, headline grabbing, oh, it's all terrible, or, I'm angry about this, because people think that's what journalism, but that isn't journalism. It's never been the way I was trained, the way I have worked, the rules. And this is another thing that you see with these so-called citizen journalists. They don't appreciate that there have to be rules. There have to be rules on impartiality. I'm very clear when I'm talking about something that is my opinion, and when I'm talking about something that is as a fact. But people are now mushing those together. And again, if you've got somebody who's getting hyper-personalised news, they're just going to be in the echo chamber of whatever anger or frustration they have with a particular topic.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's how conspiracy theories have taken such root post-COVID. But the other thing that comes off of that, Petrie, is that deeply affects our social cohesion, our sense of community. Personalised news feeds could lead to a splintered public square, so there are no commonly accepted facts to unite us as a community. And a large part of social cohesion is shared narratives. So a variety of outlooks can help people make informed choices. But if you've got too many choices, people get splintered. You see one part of the community pitted against another. And it's easy to see, isn't it, how very convincing propaganda could be used to inflame domestic protests or international conflicts even, and that's a very bad place to be.
But I've also discovered, in the many years that I've been a journalist and a broadcaster, attitudes have changed almost without recognition to facts. I can sit here, I love doing a phone-in, I get to talk to people all around the country about all sorts of different topics, and I absolutely love it. But there are times where you say, no, but that simply isn't true. That what you're saying is not a fact. I go, well, yeah, but I heard it. And I go, I don't, it doesn't matter to me where, it just isn't true. But people will choose their experts, again in an echo chamber, and then stick to it. There's no discourse, there's no ability to have a grown-up conversation and go, do you want to know why it's not true, or do you want to know where I get my truth from and how I've researched it, or whatever. There seems to be a reluctance now to we're sort of post-expert, if you like. Experts don't exist anymore because everybody's an expert.
Yes, or everybody likes to think they're an expert, don't they? On everything. That's the danger.
That's the danger, yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes, experts make it easy for that to happen because they try to be experts on everything, and none of us can be.
No.
One of the things I've been studying along that line is the impact of what I would call hybrid technology and government. So a sort of a blending of technology and government, so that government can't do its proper job in ensuring that there are fact-based news services out there. Look at Elon Musk's recent involvement in setting up that that efficiency department in the US. It led to all sorts of charges of conflicts of interest, but presumably he's not going to be the last AI owner or tech owner to cozy up to government figures exchanging money for influence, especially where AI regulation is concerned. So while Keir Starmer's talking about pushing investment above regulation with technology, we could end up with a time when politicians spend all their time schmoozing potential AI innovators, and big tech leaders might be left to draw up their own regulations, which is going to exacerbate all the things you've been talking about. Tech companies have proven time and again, especially with social media, that they're either unwilling or unable to regulate themselves, and they won't do it in a way that places the common good above corporate profit. So a lot of the answer to the problem you're describing starts at the very root with government getting serious about regulating not just news, but in this case, regulating the use of AI to promote news.
But that reminds me, when you were talking there, of Peter Thiel, who's very close with Donald Trump and Palantir. We've got issues with Palantir. Even in this country, they're trying to inveigle their way into our police systems to start profiling potential criminals, which I find extremely troubling. But there's a big database, isn't there? In America, they're trying to set up now with everybody's details on it, and they're using AI to do that. And we know that there's sort of these politics involved now with these technocrats. Is like you said, you just have to look at Musk, and now you can look at Peter Thiel. But the situation is one where who's benefiting from this? Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill that he wants to push through says that there will be no oversight on AI development for a minimum of 10 years. So these people can do what they like for 10 years.
Yeah, that's ridiculous in a so-called civilized democracy, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think that part of the issue that comes out of that then is, who do we trust, and how do we decide what is misinformation? I was looking back today in the media history of 1938, when Orson Welles broadcast his infamous War of the Worlds radio program.
Yeah.
And many of the listeners will remember hearing about this, where entire US cities were thrown into manic confusion.
They thought it was the real thing, yeah.
They thought it was an alien invasion. People trusted radio, which was still a relatively new tech at the time, because it had become such a part of their lives. And today, I think, we're starting to condition ourselves to trust things like AI and other techs in the same way. So in time, if we keep down that road, we'll see something like the same levels of confusion, mainly in areas involving news. People will be bombarded with so much data on all sides so quickly, they won't have time to process it, and they won't have the skills to think critically about it. So we need to be very, very careful to avoid what is just purely emotionally charged content, and look for information over what I would call titillation.
But we've also got a situation, just briefly, Mal, where we have got politicians who will actually look us in the face and lie. And although they used to sort of fib and do that, but again, I'm going to go back to America, because this is the biggest example at the moment of what's happening with technocrats being so involved in government, and so openly involved in government. You know, you've got Donald Trump who'll say, I had the biggest crowd you've ever seen, 250,000 people came to my birthday parade, and yet you're looking at live footage of the parade, and clearly only about 10,000 people went there. But there's no editing, if you like, of those lies. If you just say it, then it becomes the truth.
Yeah, and I think the general public kind of gets that. The problem is that we have, especially in the United States, we see more of it, thankfully, than we do in this country. But you see a lot of this, that the media will keep on about something to the point where, even though they may not agree with what Trump is saying, they're giving it credence by continually saying it, repeating it, bashing it. Bashing it simply makes the MAGA supporters get more ardent in their belief in Trump, usually. It just stokes their loyalty fires, if you like. But what we need is some cool heads. I mean, I'm going back just as a child listening to newscasters who would talk about the assassination of JFK. I was only very young, but I remember how seriously that was presented.
Absolutely. And
there were no countervailing, opinions about it. It was a bad thing. It had been done. America needed to respond. And I think some of that we've lost, as you say, because we've got this plethora of options now, not all of them bona fide in terms of journalism, and we don't want to lose that.
No. If we haven't got a free press, then we've got nothing. We don't have anything. Good to talk to you, Mal. I could chat to you forever. Mal Fletcher, futurist, thank you very much indeed. Quick break, and then we're heading to the stars.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, and a good evening to you. This is Talk, and it is Petrie here with you through until 1 o'clock. Now, listen, just a quick reminder of what we're going to be talking about at midnight. And I'd really like to hear from you if you work or have worked for the NHS. Because I'm really concerned that the model as it stands at the moment can't really survive. It'll survive in some form or other, but just throwing money at this system hasn't done any good recently, has it? And I know that, as my guest was saying earlier, we've got a situation getting over COVID and all of those things, and strikes and more strikes on the way. But the NHS works for some, but it doesn't work for others. It's already a 2 or 3 tiered organisation. If you know how to use it, if you know how to get the best out of it, it's easy to get the best out of it. If you don't, you won't. So I'd like to know what it's like outside of these so-called wealthier areas, where Wes Streeting is going to be concentrating a couple of £1 billion into helping people in working class and poorer areas. So I'd like to know what the NHS is like in your area, if you've come across it, what problems that you've had with it. So do give me a call, 0344 499 1000. Now though, let's head off to space with Andy Lound. Andy, how are you?
Good evening.
You're in a very smart blazer again, like it, very nice. India is sending its first astronaut up into space, first one in 41 years.
Yeah, it was an interesting report that came through. It's actually their 4th altogether, but their second official astronaut. In fact, technically speaking, it's their first official astronaut, because the original guy, Sharma, interesting character, was actually a cosmonaut because he flew with the Russians. But this is officially organised by the Indian Space Research Organisation, ISRO, a fantastic organisation, by the way, absolutely amazing of the work they actually do. And this astronaut, got my pronunciation right here, Shubhanshu Shukla. He's with their Air Force, and in fact, he's an astronaut candidate, Indian astronaut candidate, to be one of the first Indians launched by India itself, probably in 2027, as India is going to launch its own astronauts soon. And one reason he's on this mission to the space station, International Space Station, is as a training exercise to get himself acclimatized to space flight and carry out some experiments for ISRO. And he's also bringing out some Indian sweets to the crews on ISS, which is not going to be a bad thing, I think, really.
No, not bad at all.
Set the waistline a bit. But also, of course, India are hoping to build their own space station and hopefully going to put Indians on the moon by about 2040 themselves. So they're very much in a race, if you like, not so much with the United States, but very much in a race, competitions with China.
Yeah.
And this is good. But of course, they've had other Indians in space before. I've just got to make sure I pronounce this lady's name right as well. Kalpana Chawla. Of course, she was born in India, although was an American, but she was born in India, and she was killed in re-entry in the Columbia disaster in 2003. And of course, Sunita Williams' heritage is Indian, although she was actually born in the United States. So actually, from the point of view of Indian heritage and things, they've actually had quite a few people up there.
Yeah.
But this is the second, what you might call official Indian space traveller, because it's been funded by ISRO.
That's amazing. I mean, the race is on, isn't it, now?
This is something you might like as well. Sharma, many years ago, gave me this, and this was the mission badge from the mission he flew with the Soviets all the way back in the 80s. There we go, and he gave me that, and that's their official badge.
That's amazing.
Which they wore on their arm, which I thought was a very nice present to give.
Very nice gift to have, yeah. SpaceX, few problems, haven't we? The last one blew up. The one before that blew up. I mean, they're
blowing up on the ground now. Yes,
they're blown up on the ground.
Launch 10, the spaceship section, the top section, had to go for a ground test, which is the regulation. You have to go to ground tests of the engines, and suddenly it exploded. And in fact, it's one of the nitrogen tanks which had a problem, and it ruptured, and of course it led to an explosion, which destroyed the vehicle. So they're investigating that now. But this is why you do ground tests, and I think maybe one of these situations could be here is that, do we have to redesign the nitrogen tank? Maybe that's one of the issues they have to look at. But it was a ground test explosion, so we no longer know when the next flight is going to be, because the Starship have to have a different Starship to go on top of the whole stack to actually fly, not the one they were hoping to launch. Yes, a bit of a setback. This one would be classed as a setback rather than anything else, because it was destroyed on test. But then again, if you're going to be an engineer, you turn around and say, well, that's why we run the tests anyway.
Yeah, I suppose so, but I mean, it was extremely spectacular, and everybody was really surprised. You could hear in the voices, like, what has just happened? We weren't expecting that.
Yeah, if you look at the slow motion of the footage, you can actually see the leak towards the top of the vehicle.
Oh, really?
You can actually see it. So something ruptured, seal failed, maybe a valve failed, gasket went, something serious has failed there, or did the tank itself rupture? So it's quite a serious area. Nobody was hurt. Everyone should be aware of that.
Yeah.
Nobody was injured in this. The ground safety system worked perfectly, so no one was injured. Falling debris didn't hit anybody or hit anything. So it was safe from that point of view, but quite a spectacular disaster.
Will we be seeing more of these things happening, Andy? With this, I've just said the race is on, right? So there is a speed element to this, and we know that Elon Musk, he's pushing people to get this done quickly. But is he getting, is it being done right? I mean, with the last couple of rockets exploding, you could easily say no. Is there a speed element to this that is perhaps pushing the technology further than it's ready for?
I think it's no more in fact, if anything, the Apollo program was worse because they had a deadline to work to.
Right.
Here they've set themselves deadlines, but Musk himself has said that this is the deadline I'd like to reach, but if we don't reach it, we don't reach it because we've got safety issues to think about. Whereas Apollo was very different. Remember, we lost 3 Apollo astronauts, which died on a ground test. Interesting enough, where 3 astronauts were burnt to death.
Gosh.
Technically, they asphyxiated, but they would have burnt to death. And that was on a ground test. And that was partly because they were rushing the Apollo program rather quickly. In the Soviet Union, we don't know how many deaths there have been there because they didn't publicize their errors. But certainly they've had major explosions which destroyed the entire launch pad, and a guy called Nedelin, who was a real nasty piece of work, who was with the Soviet army, he was in charge of keeping everybody in order, and he got killed in the blast, which many people felt was tough anyway. But they were pushing it. They were pushing too hard as well, which led to disasters taking place. Cosmonauts have died. Korolev died. Komarov died when he was made a re-entry of a spacecraft, which they knew full well probably wasn't going to work properly, but they had to make the flight anyway. 3 cosmonauts died on a re-entry because they didn't wear spacesuits, because they were pushed 3 people into the spacecraft, which should only hold 2. And again, pushing the limits can be very dangerous. Musk isn't like that. It's not that way at all. He's pushing it, but at the same time, it's a big program that they're doing. So I think it's safer than it was in the 1960s and early 70s, when it was really in the Apollo era. They were pushing the very, very limits of what the technology could do. And again, they had to make sure they beat the Russians, and the Russians themselves were trying to beat the Americans. So I think there was a lot of risks taken.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Vera C. Rubin Observatory has revealed this stunning image. I mean, I've seen the image. It is absolutely breathtaking.
Behind me, yes.
Yeah,
isn't that unbelievable? This is an amazing piece of kit. This is in Chile, over 5,000 feet up on the top of a mountain, where it's beautiful, clear, and they have got the largest digital camera in operation. It's as big as a car. And if I can get the statistic, here we go. How about it? 3,200 megapixels, and it would require 400 ultra HD TV screens to show a single image.
Wow.
It's And the image behind me is absolutely breathtaking. What's called the Virgo cluster. It's a cluster of galaxies, which is ridiculously enormous area in real space. I mean, it's many light years away from us. But in the image behind us is quite remarkable because one, it's got thousands and thousands of galaxies. It's a Virgo cluster of galaxies, but there are galaxies and objects in there which have never been seen before.
Wow.
The images it's only taken so far has actually found 2,400 new asteroids by accident, because if it moves, it crosses the image. This is an unbelievable thing. It's going to do work over the next 10 years, which is going to change everything. It's going to scan the entire southern skies, every 3 days for 10 years.
Wow.
So therefore, any differences in that, brightnesses, supernovas exploding, variable stars, it's going to pick them up instantly and we're going to see them. It's going to be the most incredible piece of work. Essentially, you'll be making a 10-year movie of the southern skies. This is going to, it's because it's unfortunately it's named after Dr. Rubin, who she was brilliant. It was her work on galaxies, which looked and discovered that there was the missing matter in the universe. That we know there is matter which isn't there, which actually is another story entirely. A few days ago, it looks like they may have actually identified where that is actually composed now, which is quite interesting using the Webb telescope, amongst others. But this telescope is absolutely incredible. It's an 8-meter mirror. It's a big mirror, but the camera is breathtaking to think what it's going to be able to do.
I mean, that is so exciting. The fact that we can reach that far with those images, like with James Webb, and now we've got this, extraordinary. Wonderful to speak to you, Andy. Thank you so much for joining me. Andy Loud there, our space expert. Right, coming up, we're going to be heading off to Scotland to speak to John Boothman, who's going to be taking us through the newspapers for Thursday.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there. It is good to have your company. It is Petrie here with you, and with me is John Boothman, political correspondent at the Sunday Times in Scotland. Hello, John. How are you?
Good evening. Yeah, I'm good.
It's good to see you. Now, listen, before we get to the papers, I want to talk to you about the NHS. And I know the NHS is funded differently in Scotland and indeed also in Wales. It's devolved. But Wes Streeting now is talking about the idea of moving money into poorer working class areas where health is worse than it is in richer areas. Is just throwing money at these things in this way the way to solve the problems with the NHS, do you think?
I don't think throwing money at these things is ever, the overall answer to everything. I think it helps. I think Streeting has a point when he says that any money that is being thrown at, if that's the term we're using, the health service, has to be accompanied by reform. We've put in Scotland, which is different, more money into the health service than they have south of the border. But a lot of that money, for example, has just gone on higher wages for staff, and it doesn't seem to have resulted in any increase in performance on the one hand, but it hasn't been accompanied with any kind of reform at all.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem that I think, we have. Look, I mean, we talk about this all the time, that you can throw lots and lots of money at the health service, but because of ageing populations and other challenges, the demand on the health service is actually higher than the amount of money that we keep putting into it. The way that gets dealt with in the service is by really rationing. We have long waiting lists. We have operations, which people being forced to get operations outside the service in private. I mean, I saw a statistic only yesterday that said 40% of all the knee replacements that take place in Scotland are done now in the private sector.
Wow, it's all right if you can afford it, though, isn't it? I mean, but otherwise you just have to sit and wait for the NHS to catch up with you.
I think that's right. And again, how many years do we go back? It's not just years, it's decades. It's certainly a couple of decades that we've been talking about, all of us, moving money away from, accident and emergency and the like, and putting it into, GP surgeries, putting things more into prevention of problems rather than dealing with the problems after, people have suffered them. And yet, somehow or other, we just don't seem to be getting there.
I mean, it strikes me as well, John, that if there's an acknowledgement that health is worse in poorer areas, therefore just fix them getting the healthcare, surely the fix should be in preventing those illnesses from being an issue within those poorer communities in the first place. Therefore, they wouldn't need more healthcare. I mean, it seems to be the wrong way round.
Well, all these things are well documented. I mean, if you go in, we know that poorer areas, you usually get, for example, more people with who are smoking. We know that, that certainly in Scotland, and there's an issue around about that, we've got a higher number of people who have drug addiction, for example.
Sure.
We know that obesity rates are bigger because of the diet that people have in poorer areas. So, yeah, a bigger drive for prevention in all these areas would be absolutely welcome. But, it needs to be accompanied by a whole load of other things as well. I'm amazed when I see, for example, statistics about the kind of shops that are in poorer areas, how there are much more, takeaway shops for food, for example, in poorer areas than
betting shops
in other,
as well.
And these are things that the authorities can do something about, right? But at the end of the day, we don't.
I mean, I just mentioned betting shops there because the whole idea is to keep the poor. I mean, that when you have these betting shops on the high street, that is exactly what that is about, right? And you don't see them in richer areas. So there's something about this that needs to go back further than just allowing the problem to happen and then throwing money to fix the problem that's been caused by poverty, if you like, lack of education, lack of health education, like you said, more smokers, more drinkers, more drug takers, poverty itself. creating ill health through, the living conditions, the damp, the way that landlords treat people. It just seems to me that just to throw money at the NHS is kind of put the tail wagging the dog. The dog needs to be looked after, right? There's no point just saying, well, like when you get sick, which you will because of poverty, because of landlords, because we don't look after you, because we don't educate you properly and we don't care about you, there'll be a doctor waiting at the other end. It feels to me like not an easy fix, but an easy soundbite.
Yeah, I think that's right. But the other thing as well that I'm constantly amazed about is just we keep piling more and more responsibilities onto the health service. We don't actually take a kind of rational approach to a lot of this stuff. I mean, I remember many years ago somebody suggesting to me that even if people weren't paying for it, because the health service is free at the point of delivery or whatever, that it might be a good idea that every time somebody went to the doctors or went to the hospital for an appointment or an operation, that at the end of it they were presented with a bit of paper telling them how much it costs.
Yeah.
And somehow or other that might introduce some kind of discipline into people maybe thinking a bit more carefully about looking after themselves, about that preventative kind of approach that we have. We hear it lots of times, and I mean, I'm not exactly a svelte individual myself, right? But I feel as if I spent the time and got myself a lot fitter, then I wouldn't come up against some of the issues that, well, I'm starting to come up against, put it that way.
Yeah, no, it is really interesting, isn't it? Because I once went to my GP and they had a notice on the door saying, out of, I can't remember the numbers, let's say 1,000 appointments, 327 people didn't turn up. And I said to them, look, you should attach a value to that, the cost of that. And they said, we're not allowed to in case it's seen as being a bit bullying. So it's the same as giving somebody a bill and saying, look, you're not paying for this, but this is how much it costs the country. This is how much it cost. Because that might somehow intimidate people or put people... I don't know. I think it's a brilliant idea.
That's interesting. I mean, it's not long. I don't know whether any of the medical organisations or groups call for this anymore, but people at one time, I can certainly remember, demands that there should be a charge if people missed an appointment at the GP, and that might introduce a bit more discipline about people going there. I think it's certainly the case that I've certainly seen this or heard about it in dental surgeries, that if you don't turn up for appointments, that somehow or other there's a charge attached to that. But, look, as we go forward, we can't keep piling on demands in the service because it's already got exponential demands because of all the things that we talk about. And somehow or other things must change. But look, you come up against, that the great challenge of public opinion, where on the one hand everybody wants the service to be better, nobody wants to pay any extra taxes, and if you come along and say you want to change it and you want to do something about it, then the public object.
Yeah, it is really really difficult. But as you rightly said at the beginning of this chat, we were promised reform. We were promised right at the beginning of this Labour government that there would be no extra. I remember the words. There'd be no extra money being just thrown at the NHS without root and branch. There would be reform, and it wasn't going to be a free ride. And yet here we are.
I think, again, aren't we, I haven't followed this as carefully as I might, but are we not expecting the great 10-year health plan from West Streeting?
Yeah.
And are we not expecting
this is part of
to see some radical reforms within that? I have to say, certainly anything I read tells me that things that happen in the health service in England, certainly in some parts of it, are a bit better in the health service in Scotland. One of the rows that's going on up here at the moment is, we were promised many years ago that there would be a NAP in the health for the health service across the health service in Scotland. It hasn't happened. We are now that there is going to be an app launched in the health service in Scotland that's going to be for one particular service in one particular part of the country, and I think in England certainly things are a lot further on than they are here. I was talking to people. I had an issue recently. I was at hospital, and then when I left, you know, they, in time-honoured fashion, they gave me a letter to take to my GP, which I then handed over the counter, and you know, I then saw the person at reception typing the details of it into a computer there, and it's like, you know, this is the dark ages. And there are just some really, I think, simple technological advances that could be adopted if we had more universal systems, if you had better IT and so on, and you know, they would save quite a lot of money and save a lot of you know, person hours in terms of the work that's done, and actually would be much better for patients and for the medical professionals having to deal with them.
Yeah, I think one of the major problems is in the procurement of these things, because each trust will procure different systems and they don't talk to each other. I mean, it is basic, and it is so completely wrong. Yeah, I mean, we have in England Patients Know Best. I go in regularly for blood tests once a week. I get my blood test results pretty much that evening on this website. I can get it almost straight away, and then if my GP will have a look at them and then ask to see me if there's a problem. I mean, it's really exceptional, actually.
Well, look, again, you know, you're back. You know, if there's one thing that we could all say about the health service, I think we can anyway, by and large, it's that I can certainly say this, is that the staff do an absolutely terrific job. Yeah. I've never had, I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. And sometimes in the face of, you know, lots and lots of difficulties. I certainly wouldn't like to be working in, you know, any of our accident emergency hospitals on anything like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday or a Sunday night, when you see some of the carry-on that goes on. And the other thing as well is that, you know, the sort of thing the sort of thing I'm talking about that happens in our hospitals, you know, it's not just hospital time and difficulties for staff that actually are incurred in these situations, but you know, it's like the entire police service sometimes seems to be involved in it. You can go to a local hospital on a Saturday night and you can see, you know, queues of police cars where they're having to deal with, subdue, look after patients who, well, I don't know, either, you know, for whatever reason, they shouldn't have to deal with at all.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and they have to stay with some of the patients as well. It is just such a mess at the moment. But you know, we can't just keep throwing cash at the problem. It's got to be solved. John, let's take a break before we head to the Washington Post.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk, and it's Petrie here with you, and with me is John Boothman, political correspondent at the Sunday Times in Scotland. John, the Washington Post, it's very interesting at the moment, isn't it, about the efficacy of that strike that Donald Trump ordered on Iranian nuclear sites, because there was a report that was leaked from, I believe it was from the Pentagon, that said that actually these only set them back a couple of months. Now it appears that his puppets at the CIA have put out a completely different report saying no, they were totally eliminated.
I mean, absolutely terrific, good old-fashioned row. I think, you know, Donald Trump, or what do we now call him, Big Daddy Trump, I think
that was embarrassing.
The NATO General Secretary called him today.
Daddy Trump. Oh.
Yeah, Donald Trump, amazing propensity to exaggerate. As soon as the bombing happened, these bunker busters, no sooner had they blown up these 3 nuclear installations in Iran than Donald was out there telling us that they had been, I think the words were, totally obliterated.
Yeah.
That was followed, I think, last night by a report from the Defense Intelligence Agency at the Pentagon, which kind of seemed to suggest that it was just the entrances and a wee bit more that had been caved in by the bunker busters, and now we've got the CIA out there saying, well, Trump was more right than the Defense Intelligence Agency. And in the wake of all of that, we've got Trump piling in and Pete Hegseth, his Defense Secretary, defending their position. I saw one report in a British newspaper earlier talking about the people who leaked this report from the Defense Intelligence Agency were scum.
Yeah.
You know, at least that's a lot milder word than the word that Donald was using yesterday in the telly about Israel and Iran.
Yeah, that was extraordinary, wasn't it? Look, we all want to F and Jeff, right? I mean, I'm terrible off microphone. I really am a terrible swearer. But, you know, there's a chip in my brain as soon as I walk into a studio and there's a red light on that I don't swear. I don't think I've ever done it, I touch wood. But it's quite something to see a statesman doing it, isn't it? The President of the United States.
I couldn't help reflect after I saw this last night about what an almighty row there would have been if either Barack Obama or Joe Biden had used
we'd never
that
hear the
kind
end
of
of it.
language. Absolutely. Yeah. And also, you know, I suppose the kind of counter to that is that, you know what, you know, and perish the thought that I'm out there, you know, vociferously defending too much about Donald Trump, should I say. But, you know, he does manage to speak the language of ordinary Americans.
Do you know what? And the frustration, there will be a lot of people who admire that. You know, they say, look, he was so frustrated, so passionate about this that he let out the F-bomb as well as the bunker busting bomb. Have you seen, though, I asked my producer to have a look at this earlier because I'm not sure he quite believed me, but Donald Trump has put out on Truth Social a video clip to the tune, I think is it the Beach Boys? You know, bomb, 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 Iran, Barbaran.
Thankfully, I haven't seen that. But
oh my God, this is the President of the United States who's put out this video to that tune, bombing Iran. We've just, other words in it, we've just seen a mosque, let's throw stones and level Iran like a car park, to that tune, with bombers flying over Iran. And at a time when diplomacy is going to be the key to holding this ceasefire, right? I cannot believe that he did that.
Well, again, you know, like across a whole load of fronts, he's tore up, you know, the rule book, all the old order and the old rules and the old ways that people behave. They've all gone now because he's completely changed, you know, it's just changed the way that we all think and look at people engaging in politics. And everybody, and this is another interesting facet of what's going on now in the world, is everybody's bending over backwards to accommodate.
Oh, this is the whole Daddy Trump thing, isn't it? I mean, I look at these sycophants and these suck-ups around him, and I just think, can you, one of you, or between all of you, can you grow a pair? Just one pair between all of you.
Look, the difficulty with that is, you know, as well as, you know, what you've just said, is that, you know, what's now happening is that countries around the entire planet are being locked in for many years ahead into, you know, the sort of agenda that Trump is really helping to fashion because of his Fortress America position, because, for example, of, you know, the new relationships he wants to carve out in defence around the planet. We're having, and we have decided, in fact, us and 26 other countries, I think, in NATO today, to double the amount of money in a decade that we spend in defence. Now, that looks great when you watch it on TV and see that everybody's agreeing, except for the fact that that's going to come at great expense to each and every single country who's involved in that.
Yeah, it's just that, you know, that they were so pleased today that they got some recognition of the Article 5 that Donald Trump would agree with the triggering of Article 5, which is the hit one, hit us all, we all respond, part of the NATO agreement. But he changes his mind.
Well,
he'll have a different view as soon as he's up on his aircraft going home.
Did I not hear a wee rider in there where he used the words "for now"?
For now, yeah.
Yeah, so...
We can't trust him. I mean, you just can't. We can't rely on him. It's not because he's said oh, it's not fair. It's because we can't rely on America anymore. We've got to up our spending. That's what's really happened. And yet they all suck up to Donald Trump, who can't be relied on. Extraordinary. I just want to touch on this story before, actually there's a couple I want to look at. It's a very interesting front page from the Washington Post. The plan to keep vaccines flowing despite RFK Jr., who is the health secretary, and he's not a fan, to put it mildly, of vaccines, but professional medical societies, pharmacies and state health officials and vaccine manufacturers, as well as new groups, are mobilising behind the scenes to preserve access for vaccines. Again, words I can't believe I'm reading out.
Look, Robert Kennedy Jr., well-known vaccine skeptic, you know, I think people were, well, many medical professionals were aghast when he became the health secretary in America. He's dismantling all of the old infrastructure and machinery round about the provision of vaccines in America and the rules governing when vaccines, you know, can be put out to people, despite what would appear to be pretty conclusive evidence of their effectiveness. And what's happened is this is the fight back against, you know, him dismantling that old order, professional associations, manufacturers and others trying to get together to cobble up something, you know, alongside public health experts to keep, you know, the provision of vaccines in America for a whole series of illnesses flowing. Absolutely fascinating.
It really, I mean, I can just imagine people having to go to sort of speakeasy type places and getting handed vaccines in paper bags at this rate. It's quite something. And finally, if we can, tariffs kick in. The toy industry has raised prices. Again, not surprising, although Donald Trump said the girls can make do with 2 dolls and the boys can make do with 5 pencils or something.
I mean, look, and why is this? This is all to do with the Trump tariffs. That's it. I think 3 out of 4 toys in America, guess where they're built? They're built in China. And China has been the biggest target of the tariffs in America. Now, We heard this before when Trump introduced the tariffs, that this is the kind of thing that would happen, and that at the end of the day, the people who would suffer most would be the consumers in America. Now, that's the toy example. I'm sure there'll be many, many other examples to follow as well.
Yeah, we're hearing about these sort of things now because stockpiles have run out. So everything now coming in is new and therefore subject to those tariffs. And they were warned there would be that kind of lag, and indeed here it is. Well, let's move on to the Financial Times. The photograph there on the front of the practically all boys club of NATO, and Mark Rutte there, the head of NATO. I mean, he has gone, in my estimation, this last couple of days. I mean, really embarrassing for him. But a photograph there of Donald Trump centre stage, obviously, because they're all, as I said, sucking up to him.
Well, funnily enough, I mean, I was trying to remember earlier. I think Mark Rutte was the president of the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, and I was trying, when I saw this, think maybe he's made kind of some mistake or something in the text that he sent to Trump, but no. Everybody seemed quite proud of it. I saw Donald Trump was asked about it earlier on on the TV, and tried to make a bit light of all of it. But you know, I mean, anytime I see that, just calling somebody daddy, maybe it's just, I don't know, it's just creepy. I mean, it's just got sexual connotations.
But don't older men pay younger women to call them daddy? I mean, isn't that a thing?
I don't really want to go there.
No, you know? I don't want to go there, particularly if it's Donald Trump. Anyway, so there they all are. On their one day, one issue NATO meeting, very unusual, but they wanted to keep Donald Trump's attention apparently, and they couldn't, so if they went off and talked about anything else, they were worried they'd lose him. Let's have a look at the Metro. Arise Sir Gareth, first manager to guide the Three Lions to 2 major finals, broke down so many barriers. He didn't win any of them though, did he?
Well, you got, look, you know, look, I'm a Scotsman. I better watch what I'm saying here.
Yeah, you don't
on UK radio. Actually, I think you know, I thought Gareth Southgate was a good guy. He was one of the better guys. He certainly had taken England further than they had gone before for a while. I think 2 Euro finals in 2020 and 2024. Unlucky in both, to be honest. You know, like, you know, football's a pretty unforgiving, you know, game for managers. You know, even if you can achieve. You know, I have a slight personal interest in this. Postecoglou used to be the Celtic manager, and he had a great couple of seasons here in Scotland. He goes to England, he has a bad, you know, league season, wins them their first trophy in 300 years or whatever it is, and he gets packed out the door. I mean, it's kind of pretty unforgiving business.
Yeah.
And I thought it was quite nice seeing Southgate. He talked about tonight how he's got a kind of gentler, kind of slower pace of life, and the stuff that he's doing now. Talked a wee bit about his business interest, and it was good to see him getting his knighthood from Prince William, who of course was the president of the Football Association through some of this, and I think is a patron of the Football Association now. Yeah, look, I think, you know, by and large, people look quite favourably on Southgate, but you know, it's a bit like most football managerships just end in disaster.
That's why they write into their contracts fantastic exit fees, don't they?
Yeah,
because they know they could be sacked within a week.
I think there's also a really... I mean, this is just a sort of pretty amateur observation from me, right? But it always has seemed to me that the clubs who the more a club gets rid of a manager, the more unlikely they are to have success. The clubs that have success are the ones that, you know, through a bit of thick and thin, keep the manager there, keep them there for a few years, and if they can do that, they're more likely, I think, to be successful than, you know, changing, you know, the manager like you change your underwear. And
why am I suddenly thinking about politics? when you say that, because we've had so many different leaders of parties, and it looks like Keir Starmer, we'll get to that in a bit probably, Keir Starmer might be in trouble himself. So maybe they'd do well to keep hold of their manager for a couple of years. More likely to succeed, I don't know, it depends on the manager. Let's take a break, John, back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, it is Talk, and it's Petrie here with you, and with me is John Boosman, political correspondent at the Sunday Times in Scotland. John, let's have a look at the Independent. Again, that embarrassing NATO praises Daddy Trump, and yeah, let's move on from that. That's the Independent. This is interesting on the Telegraph. Starmer set to back down on benefits. Now, I was talking about this yesterday and say, look, if he backs down on this, he's done. If he loses on this, he's done. If the Tories get him through with this bill, he's done. But backing down is the least of the worst, is it?
I mean, I noticed that the Telegraph's got this story, the paper's got this story, Guardian's got a version of this story suggesting that, you know, in the face of what I think we were pushing 130 rebels earlier this evening, that Starmer is going to back down on this plan to reform benefits, the personal independent payments, universal credit as well. That Labour MPs are just not happy about it, as you would imagine they would be not happy about it. Earlier today, you know, Starmer was talking about it being noises off from them. Angela Rayner, his deputy, was out there saying the vote was going to go ahead on Tuesday, and here we are now sitting in a place where it looks as if he'd make a U-turn. I mean, he's already, you know, made a U-turn over the winter fuel payment. We've seen that. That's a bit of an embarrassment as well.
The grooming gang inquiry.
Yeah, you know, I think I can remember even last autumn we were talking about, you know, what a bad start he had. You know, look, this just looks, if he does make a U-turn, as a great, well, just weakness on his part. I don't think it'll be fatal or anything like that.
Do you not think that they could call a vote of no confidence in him? Look, if you've got a Prime Minister who can't stick by anything and flip-flops on everything and looks weak to the country, they're going to have to get rid of him before the next election anyway, because they will just see him as a liability. I mean, could they not push this as far as a vote of no confidence if he were to back down?
I'm not sure that it's kind of quite at anything like that point or anything yet, but I just think it does make him look weak. You know, where are we in the political cycle? You know, we're about to go into the summer recess. You know, it might cause him a lot of bother at party conference if he doesn't back down. That's another thing that would be a bad start to, you know, the next parliamentary session if that happened. So, as I say, don't know that it's fatal, but it just paints them in a pretty poor light. The polls are looking pretty awful for Labour as well now, and it's just in a bad place. And a lot of it, you feel, not just this particular issue, but across a whole range of issues, has been really pretty self-inflicted.
Yeah, I mean, really. But the thing is with a weak leader is that it then becomes the talking point of the party. And it then becomes the shark circling, people positioning themselves. Everybody's saying that Wes Streeting is, pushing himself forward. He wants to be the next leader. So it's distracting. When you have a weak leader, we've seen it with the Tories time and time again in very short succession. When you have a weak leader, it distracts the government from getting on with government business, because at the end of the day they're pretty much all self-serving, and they will be concentrating and looking at their own belly buttons rather than looking at the country. That's the problem that we have with this.
I think, look, I see where you're coming from. As I say, I mean, I don't think it's quite fatal yet. He's got a huge majority in Parliament. I think we maybe, the other thing that's happening, and I can say this from north of the border, is that, the next phase of anything that goes on is the run-up to the Scottish elections. There's Welsh elections. There's a huge number of English local elections next year. Yeah. And if Labour, does really, really badly in that, I think that's when you start thinking maybe about, some writing on the wall and stuff. But, I think he's got... Look, I think the bother for this is if he has to give up on this, which was supposed to be, pretty centrepiece stuff, the reform of the welfare state that Starmer was going to do, about getting people back to work, about, in particular, the huge worries about how much, not just that, the welfare payments are costing at the moment, but the exponential growth in them going forward, then the person who is going to have to, pick up the pieces around all of that, and that would be in the budget after the summer, would be the Chancellor of the Exchequer. But I suspect a whole load of the rebels, particularly those in the left of the party, and a whole load of people outside in the Labour Party, like the trade unions, will be out there and might be quite happy to see the benefits staying and the government going back on the promises it made about tax cuts, about taxes rather. Yeah. And then that gets portrayed, if something has to go on that front, as yet another difficulty for the government. Here's something else they promised and they never did. Yeah.
I mean, you've picked a story from the Telegraph as well, saying that working class voters are abandoning Labour for reform. And so all of this plays into that, doesn't it, as well? And you've got, Labour trying to figure out what the threat is from reform, and in doing so, probably playing into their hands.
I think that's right. Again, he's shifted Starmer himself has shifted the agenda, but he's trying to address some of the things that the Tories tried to do about immigration and failed. That's a big, big thing when you look at that poll that you're talking about. So I think it said that 62% of Labour voters think immigration is too high. But look, Starmer on that front is never going to out Farage in terms of immigration. And the poll also goes through a whole series of other reasons why, the electorate's disillusioned. It feels in a position, and Starmer is the person who's the target of this, feels in a position that, it's just hopeless and things are not getting sorted. Yeah. And, I think, for much of the electorate across every part of the UK, what they want to do is, as well as see some material benefits flowing through, in their pockets, for want of a better description, they just want to see better services, they want to see better delivery, they want to see you know, even if it's to the extent of the potholes being filled in the roads. They want the bins collected on time. They want to have,
it's
the
very
opportunity.
basic, actually, isn't it? It really is what we really want from government. It is a smaller government that actually delivers what they're supposed to do, and that is to keep the lights on, keep the health, it's actually quite a short list of what we require. But we have been so let down, haven't we, consistently by politicians over-promising and under-delivering, or in some cases not delivering at all, that there is a sense now of, well, look, how much worse can reform do? We might as well give them a try.
Thereby you get that sense of hopelessness, about disillusion. It's about, I want to stick two fingers up to any of the old parties that are on the go, and I'll go and have a go at Farage, because interestingly enough, in an interesting way, just as we said of Trump earlier on, Farage seems to be able to speak to the electorate in a language that they understand, in a language that's direct, in a language that they believe, and, you know, some of it, frankly, is probably not particularly economically literate, as we've heard people say, but at the end of the day, it chimes with where ordinary people are at. I was at a reform conference working at the weekend in Scotland, and had a really interesting conversation with one of their leading members in Scotland, who said to me that he had spent some time in the last few weeks going into what he called politically no-go areas in schemes in Glasgow. Wow. And he said that he was going to these areas. He was a former Conservative. In the past, they would have chased him out, right? Never mind give him a hearing. But he said that he was going into these areas now as a Reform candidate, and he said he was picking up support. He said he was getting support in particular, and we've seen this in the polling, from young men, he said, young people who were apprentices, plumbers, joiners, that kind of stuff. People who were looking to get themselves out of the situation they were in. They had jobs, they wanted something better for themselves, and they were saying, we'll have a go at reform.
I mean, again, you can't blame people for looking for an alternative, and I mean, Farage has the same, for me, the same sort of charisma that Donald Trump clearly has, and that language that he uses, even swearing is like, yeah, well, that's what we all do. That's the you know, he speaks for us, but policy is very thin, you know, uncosted, all of those things as well. So it is interesting to draw that parallel. Let's have a look at the eye. As you said, Starmer to retreat on benefit cuts to end the rebellion. I mean, that rebellion is incredibly embarrassing for him. The Daily Mail has gone for an interesting story. Stop Labour's betrayal of our SAS heroes. SAS veterans are being hounded with the threat of prosecution.
The Tories introduced something called the Legacy Act, which in effect protected ex-servicemen from prosecution over things that might have happened, for example, in Northern Ireland. I think the government, the UK government, wants to repeal that. And what's now happening is, you know, ex-army senior officers, ex-SAS officers are going to the government and say, look, you can't do this, because if you do this, it might mean that some soldiers who served in Northern Ireland would get prosecuted. I think there was a court decision recently where a judge ruled that the killing of 4 IRA people by allegedly people in the armed forces was not lawful, and these people might face charges. And what the story in the Mail is saying is that, you know, the government shouldn't change its. The government shouldn't get rid of this Legacy Act, and the people in the armed forces should be protected.
Well, I mean, you can't expect soldiers in the future to defend us, providing there's been no actual criminality, right? Then soldiers have to be soldiers, and you don't know what they go through or why those things happened if you've never done it yourself. So, yeah, I think that that's a very, very difficult one. But we can't expect. They'll just put down their weapons in future. and go, I'm not like the police, I'm not going to get involved, which is not what we want. The Daily Star.
The Daily Star.
I don't even know what to... Daddy Donny is on the front, which is literally making me want to throw up every time I say it. The BBC ends Call the Midwife. I
think that's a shame.
I've never watched it.
Oh, this is going to sound terrible. I can bubble at Call the Midwife, right? I mean,
really?
The only thing that's disturbing about Call the Midwife, right, is that it manages to go through, I think it's been on for, 15 years. Every year at Christmas, right, they have an episode, and it seems to kind of jump, 5 years at a time, right, every year. But the characters all look the same, and I find it kind of deeply disturbing. But look, it's good family entertainment. It's good old-fashioned stuff. I think it is the kind of stuff that brings people together, particularly in the festive season and stuff. I just think it's a bit sad,
Yeah, I think it's just won a Trick Award, didn't it? Didn't it win the Trick Award for?
I think so.
Yeah, it just won. I know that. All good things must come to an end.
It's good old-fashioned stuff. It's not got any swearing. It's kind of usually got a bubbly bit in the middle and a happy ending. Maybe we need more happy endings.
Yeah, no, I agree. But please don't say that to Daddy Donny. I'm going to take a quick break on that note.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi there, this is Talk, and it's Petrie here, and with me John Boothman, who's the political correspondent for the Sunday Times in Scotland. The Daily Express, John, we will keep fighting for women's safety.
How many stories like this, do we just continue to see about safe spaces for women? In this case, this is, a situation about dedicated female-only facilities for nurses at a hospital. There's a very celebrated case in Scotland at the moment, which is still going through the courts, about a nurse called Sandy Peggy in Fife, where she ended up being disciplined because she objected to sharing facilities, a changing room with a trans doctor. We just see these stories all the time. I think many people thought the Supreme Court judgment a couple of months ago would put an end to some of the fights round about this, but all sorts of agencies, whether they be in government, certainly in Scotland, or other agencies like the Health Service, appear to be dragging their feet in terms of dealing and implementing what in effect that Supreme Court judgment said about the protection of single-sex species. And we're now all waiting for guidance from the Equalities and Human Rights Commission about it, which we hope should come quite soon, and it might put a stop to this kind of stuff.
Yeah, this is three nurses who decided to take legal action after a biological male colleague, identifying as a woman called Rose, joined them in female hospital changing rooms. And also it's worth noting, isn't it, that there's a lot of women in the NHS from all sorts of different cultures and religious backgrounds, for whom changing in front of a biological male would be, not allowed, for example.
I mean, I've followed this debate pretty closely in Scotland, because we had, of course, the great row about the gender recognition legislation in Scotland.
Yeah,
which,
Nicola Sturgeon shot herself in the foot with that, didn't she?
Sure, yeah, which triggered off a lot of this. I think, that there were some forgotten groups round about this, whilst everybody on one side of the debate was anxious to go out there and support a tiny minority of trans people. There were a whole series of women from ethnic minorities, women from different religions, who, this in their culture, in their religion, right, is a pretty severe thing.
Yeah.
And it just seemed to me that, they were forgotten in the great political debates round about this. Both sides were going at it hammer and tongs and stuff, but there were just some groups, it was just like, not just forgotten, but completely ignored in it. And again, let's hope that, people should start realising a bit more that those people have rights too.
Yeah, but it's also a case, isn't it? For the way I look at this whole trans debate, is that a handful of very outspoken, pushy trans women pushed it too far, and they've now ruined it for a lot of trans women who just wanted to have a normal life and go to the loo when they're shopping at Tesco, and they can no longer do that, and I'm really saddened by that, because it was just pushed too far, this whole thing that I'm a woman, but it's just kind of like, if they just to a degree just slowed things down and just took their time, we wouldn't be here right now. But I was hearing about a young trans woman the other day who was out with her grandmother. This was through a friend, and her grandmother offered her a cup of tea, and she said, "No, I don't like to drink when I'm out because I can't use the bathroom." And that, this is somebody who's as a teenager, who is identifying as female, but is worried about using the public loos, and I just think that's sad as well.
The thing for me, certainly being around the political scene in Scotland, is the great legacy of bitterness that all of this caused.
Yeah.
And we used to be able in this country to have civilised debates about things, and we then ended up in a situation where
we were bullied.
Individuals
we were bullied.
Individuals couldn't hold meetings.
No.
People were not allowed to express their views without being shouted down and hounded out. The whole thing was just frankly appalling.
It was disgusting. And it's backfired.
Well, I think it's backfired in the end, right? But, look, the debate's going to continue, and if it is going to continue, let's hope we can have any of these kind of debates in a better way.
I absolutely agree with you. I really do, because we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater with this one, it's a tragedy for those people who are trans, who just want to live a normal life and not have all this noise, and it's ruined it for them. Let's have a look at your sister paper, The Times. US officials to visit Iran for talks on nuclear programme. I hope they haven't seen that video that Trump put out.
Well, again, the slightly bizarre thing about all of this is weren't we up to the 6th round of talks about this anyway before the Israelis and then the Americans decided to go in and blow the whole thing up? So here we are. All of this stuff has come and gone. There's now a ceasefire, which of course we all hope will hold, and talks are resuming. Let's hope again they can get something fixed out, right? But I think this is going to be a really, really touchy and difficult situation going forward, and it will be interesting to see whether the Iranians are going to agree to things that are put on the table in front of them. I think one of the other interesting, legacies of the past week, and I think I might be right in this, is that, last week all of a sudden everybody started talking about regime change in Iran as if this would automatically
solve the problem.
Yeah. And that seemed to me, and look, again, I could be totally wrong in this, to fly in the face of conventionally what usually happens in these situations, which is if you go and attack another country, people rally around the flag and rally around the government.
Which is exactly what appears to have happened in Iran. Exactly that. Talking of regime change, the story at the bottom of the front page on the Times, rebel MPs want regime change in the Labour government because Keir Starmer, we've heard about this boys' club that he has advising him, led by Morgan McSweeney, that he's getting wrong advice and they're keeping the backbenchers away from him, which is why he keeps having to U-turn and flip-flop all the time.
Yeah, well, look, overexcited boys, I think somebody is quoted as calling them in the Times. I think Starmer, Morgan McSweeney is Chief of Staff getting the blame. I think Sir Alan Campbell, who's the Chief Whip, seems to come in for some criticism that somehow or other that they haven't been listening to backbenchers. I mean, again, I think it's worth saying that all of this in the Labour Party, if you were going to propose taking money away from disabled people, making welfare cuts, is all entirely predictable. One of the rebels is a guy called Brian Leishman, who's a Scottish MP who I've been following, just elected last year. And the slogan that he's been using in any of his correspondence is to say, I didn't join the Labour Party to impoverish people. I think anybody could have known that this might have been the reaction to any of these kind of proposals.
Well, obviously, but they don't mind impoverishing us with tax rises. Look, we've got about 30 seconds, John, just quickly on the Bezos wedding that is...
I mean, they're taking over Venice, I think, is it for 3 days? I just think this is just absolutely incredible. I mean, there's luxury yachts coming out of their ears. It's just an amazing spectacle. I was struck by a couple of things I read in an article about the view of the locals. One of the things that's happening around the world is people are talking about over-tourism. Over-tourism in Venice, this is a problem, but I mean, I think Bezos and all the people
I think that's
taking that a bit too far.
Yeah, it really is. Anyway, I wish their nuptials well. £34 million for the weekend. John, thank you very much indeed. It's great to see you, great to talk to you. Thank you for that. Right, coming up, it's just you and me, and we're going to be looking at the NHS. I mean, it's not the first time we've done this, but this is really interesting because Wes Streeting, he's got a 10-year plan. I don't even know if the Labour government have got 10 years, but anyway, a 10-year plan to look at the NHS. One of the ideas that he mooted today was to take money and give it to poorer working-class areas where health issues are driving people to give up work ostensibly. That's what it is. So the question is really, what is it like in the NHS outside of these so-called wealthier areas, which I think they mean cities? I'll be back in just a moment to take your calls.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, good morning to you. This is Petrie here with you for the next hour. And this is your hour. This is the hour where you get the chance to talk back. So what I want to chat with you about this morning is about the NHS. We all, at some point, have probably used it. I can't imagine there's anybody in this country that hasn't been to a GP or been to hospital or some form of use of the NHS. Now, I mean, ever since I can really, any time in my adult life, I've lived in a city. I've lived in London, basically. So I've got a slightly warped view of what the NHS is like. I don't remember as a child ever using it when I was growing up. So I'd like to know what the NHS is like outside of the richer urban areas, because Wes Streeting today, the Health Secretary, he was talking about ploughing more money into poorer working class areas in order to fix the two-tier NHS, that people in those poorer areas have got fewer GP appointments, they're being diagnosed with certain cancers much later than people in richer areas. But I'm just wondering what the NHS is really like out, let's say, in the rural areas. I did mention this earlier, that if I were to have a collapse now, there's a hospital a couple of minutes down walking distance from the studios here. There's my GP surgery is very close to me. I can if I want an appointment, I can pretty much get an appointment. I get well looked after in the NHS. My local hospital, there are several hospitals that I go to, Hammersmith Hospital and Charing Cross Hospital, and there's been another one that I've been going to as well for different types of treatment. So, and they're all within, I think the furthest one away is 15-20 minutes from me. So it's very easy when you live in a city, particularly a city like London. I think we do rather well with the number, certainly with the number of hospitals and the distance to those hospitals if it was an emergency situation. Not quite the same if you live in the countryside. So I'd like to hear from you what it's like where you live with the NHS, and do you live in one of those poorer areas? Do you find it very difficult to access GP appointments? Do you find it very difficult to get the care that you need? I was discussing this with John earlier and saying I think this is kind of the tail wagging the dog in a way, because it seems that if there are major health concerns in the poorer areas, then it is poverty that is leading to those health concerns, and perhaps that's something we can look at. Then people won't need to access the doctors or the hospitals. I don't know, maybe that's a bit old-fashioned of me, but NHS workers say the biggest problems are that they're overmanaged or they're poorly managed. They also say there's not enough money, but we keep throwing money at the NHS. We keep putting more and more funds into the NHS, and it is never, ever enough. Is it just a case of the money? Look, we've got an ageing population. We know as you get older, you need to use your GP or your hospital more. You get more ailments. Your hips start to go. It's not going to be long before I need my hips done, I tell you. But we all need more care when we get older. Things start breaking down, falling off, and we need more care. So we've got an ageing population. So of course, there's never going to be enough time or money in the NHS. But can it survive without major reform? This is really the issue to me. How do we keep the NHS going? And in its current form, I don't think it will. I don't think it'll be in its current form in 10 years' time. I think there'll be something, but I don't think it'll be what it is right now. So I'd love to hear from you. Can you let me know if you've used the NHS recently? Like I said, I have a very good experience with it. A lot of people have a very good experience with it, but I do know that it is a lot worse in the countryside than it is in the cities. So give me a call, 0344 499 1000. Those calls are charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk and send me your message to 87222. You can also WhatsApp a message to the same number, 0344 499 1000, or leave a short voice note if you don't fancy talking to me, but I will take that as a personal slight. No, I won't, I promise. Andrew's message saying the NHS needs major reform, not more money. The list of problems with the NHS is too long for a text message, but I do know I don't trust any push to privatise it. Just look at our dentists, veterinary practice and care homes. No, thank you. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you used those as examples, because the dentist now, it's so expensive. I can't bear it. It's just so much money. I mean, anything that needs doing, it's you know, in privately, it's hundreds and hundreds of pounds. I barely walk out of there without spending £1,000. It's really upsetting, actually. So you're right, and we don't want to go down that route. And veterinary practices, again, I've had to spend a lot of time in the vets because my older dog hasn't been very well. He's needed surgery. Again, I mean, I went to pay the bill in the vets, and I had to put more money into my current account. I just went, oh, it's that much, is it? What? Yeah, sure, I'll just have to wait a minute. I've just got to move some money around so I can afford to pay you. Ridiculous. So yeah, we don't want the NHS to go down that route. But if reform doesn't come, if something doesn't change, I don't see how it's sustainable. I just don't see how we can do it. We're nearly at £200 billion a year as it is. So, and if these doctors get their 29% pay rise, any extra money that we've put into the NHS recently will all go on pay rises, which, by the way, every time we've put in a big lump sum of money into the NHS, it's gone on extra pay. So the system itself, the staff may be getting, you know, better remunerated, and I think they should be, but nothing else is really advancing or changing. So, and Joanna, they're both from Salisbury. There you go. I wonder if you know each other. It's not a lack of money in the NHS, it's just badly spent. There are too many highly paid managers managing managers. I agree. A DEI, etc., doing a terrible job. Waste and bad negotiations for procurement. That is the real bugbear for me. Not utilising the facilities to cope with additional as well as an aging population. Unlike the private sector, poor pay and staff facility adding to low morale, and it doesn't improve productivity. It can only survive if there's a huge change to the way the NHS is run to match the private sector. Trim the fat. Completely agree. Completely agree with you. Let's go to your calls now, and Gary is in Poole. Hello, Gary.
Yes, hi, good evening, people. Thank you very much once again. As far as NHS is concerned, I was very interested listening to your first caller, not caller, guest.
Yeah.
You was talking about the NHS, and I was waiting for him to say something, and he never said it.
What were you waiting for him to say?
What I want to just tell you is quickly, my background. I am an ex-HP network consultant. I'm an ex-HP server and big data consultant as well. So
oh wow! Okay, yeah. So
understand what I wanted him to say. They've got, and here is the four words: a broken IT system. That is what the NHS have got, and everybody here talking. Nobody ever does. You got this chap. Government official who wants to throw money here and throw money to the rural areas. Nonsense. You've got to fix a broken IT system. I have a chronic neurology condition, and I was living in Manchester, and I had to go see a neurologist as a urologist. My neurologist organized it. But first I had to go through the district nurses where they measure how much urine, all sorts of things. And then you get to see the next level, and then you get to see the urologist. And we had gone and done fairly extensive what they called urodynamics testing. And then he put me onto a course of tablets and said, okay, right, 4 weeks' time, come back and we'll reassess. Let's just see how these tablets work. I moved down to Cornwall, and I go to my GP and I said, this is the story. Oh, we can't access your records. So I said, what do you mean we can't access my records?
Ridiculous.
And so then the nurse at the doctor's surgery said, no, if you want to see a neurologist, you've got a urologist, you've got to start from the beginning again. I kid you not, I promise you, I'll gladly give you open permission to my dental records.
I believe you. I totally believe you. I mean, do you remember, Gary, that fiasco when they spent £25 billion on this computer system? It was probably...
I cannot believe.
And then they threw it away.
The computer companies that are looking after the NHS at the moment are absolutely raking in millions. The government will go and put in extra 100 million or whatever to the NHS. Half of that is going to these computer companies who don't deserve it.
I agree. And the other thing is, isn't it, that the trusts, because they're separate islands, if you like, they're buying systems that are not compatible with each other.
Exactly.
I mean, it's crazy stuff. The fact that they can't access your record, it should just be put your name and date of birth in, and then everything that you've been through should come up.
Just come up there, and then I could have carried on the treatment.
Yeah.
So what happened? I had to go back and see the district nurse and start, and that's costing the NHS another 2,000, 3,000 bucks or whatever, and do that by 100 times. I could not. I eventually got so fed up. I turned around to them and I said, leave it. I'll sort myself out. So for the last 4 years, I've been managing my own and deciding which tablets I should be on and which I shouldn't be on.
Oh, gosh, Gary.
But
that's probably not very sensible.
Is that your first guest mentioned, well, I tell you, some baffling, I loved his jargon.
Yeah.
One thing as a consultant is I was always told, if you don't know what you're talking about, just baffle them with jargon.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with me, I think that there's so much wrong with the NHS, the background staff, if you like, of the NHS. Like you said, the procurement system is absolutely ridiculous. You've got the computing system which ties into the procurement system. It's crazy that isn't.
Nothing is broken there. Everything is broken. And then your first guest once there, he mentioned a very two words, a knowledge base. And you also mentioned it about I'm living in Manchester and I get cured of cancer.
Yeah.
Argument's sake. And then a little poor chap sitting down in Cornwall gets the exact same thing, but doesn't get cured.
Yeah.
Because there's no knowledge base. If the NHS had a proper computer system, you can build a knowledge base. The chap in Manchester that was cured of that cancer, the neurologist down in Cornwall can tap into the knowledge base and say, oh, wow, hang on a second, let me try that. Exactly. In Manchester.
Exactly that.
And I built knowledge bases in South Africa with the mining companies, Anglo-American and Rand Mines and underground explosions and all that sort of thing happening and how to avoid them. And you go talk
because that's just experience, isn't it? So, I mean, AI will help with that, won't it? That knowledge base, that crossover of information.
AI will only understand what it's been fed.
That's true.
Because it has not been fed how Joe Soap handled the underground explosion on B Shaft. And AI will not be able to help it.
Yeah, true.
But AI can help go and if that information, if that data is somewhere in a knowledge base, AI can go and find it. Yes, definitely. And that was the one crucial thing, and the one thing I loved about your first guest, what he said was about having knowledge bases. And
Yeah.
I just wish, I wish I could walk into the NHS tomorrow. The first thing I would do is say, right, we are going to sort out, I want every single IT company around the table tomorrow morning, and we're going to put up a huge big blackboard, and we're going to draw exactly. My GP in the one village could not access the information when I moved villages. They couldn't access the information. I had to physically go and get copies.
Yeah, the paper copies that they have to move around.
copies.
They're
And
literally just a big fat envelope with all of. It's crazy.
And it's a broken IT system. And
That is still costing millions, right? But it just doesn't work.
but what you got to do is you got to have somebody's got to have a bit of whatever and stand up and then say, okay, right, I want all the IT companies around this table tomorrow. I wish I could do it.
I wish you could do it as well.
I would do that tomorrow, and I would tell all of them, and I don't care if it's whether Dimension Data or Hewlett Packard. Okay, I was with Hewlett Packard, but around the table with me, and I want to understand exactly how all the network, what the IT network of the NHS looks like.
Yeah, why aren't they talking to each other? Why aren't they able to? It's just madness to me that they've allowed this to happen.
And here I'm having to repeat Eurodynamic testing and all sorts of things. And
and you extrapolate that across the country. How many millions of pounds have wasted on re-examining somebody, retesting somebody, redoing everything?
And then people just get fed up. And of course, what happens? They get fed up, and in the smaller community, maybe they get so fed up they pass away, they die.
Yeah, I completely see that. I completely see that.
They're so fed up with the system. There's no knowledge base that any neurologist or any specialist or any doctor or any nurse can go and just type in a few words. Patient with bleeding from the eye. Stupid example. But a knowledge base will come up and say, check this, check that.
Yeah, have you thought of this? Yeah.
There is none of that, and this is supposed to be the UK.
Yeah, and the other thing is, if once you get dropped off a list as well, trying to get back on a list is impossible. I had a neurologist for many years, but then he left the NHS and went private, and I was on his list, and it took me.
I know what you're going to say.
Nearly 3 years to get another neurologist. In the meantime, I'm taking quite dangerous drugs. I'm not being monitored properly. I mean, I was for the drugs, but not for my brain or anything. But I finally got back on a list, but it took me so long to get back on it.
And how much pounds were wasted for you to get to that point?
Oh, I mean, honestly. How many hours were wasted, and stress is bad for you, and all of those things, just to get a brain scan. Yeah.
And you mentioned the other point about missing appointments.
Yeah.
It's been worked out, estimated that missing appointments. I know you were saying earlier was one of your guests. They're not allowed to publish it, but information that I've had talking to various people is that anything from £50 to 200, and don't ask me why, £217
per appointment.
I would have just said 220.
Yeah. I mean, and also that disparity will again be because of rents, local rents, I suppose, the cost of the surgery and the doctors and everything. I mean, it just doesn't seem. Like you said, it does come back to that IT system. If they can just fix that, then everything would run more smoothly. But we spent £25 billion on a computer system. I think it was, gosh, it might be 15, 20 years ago now, considering how old I am. But and then we just threw it away. It didn't work. Just went, oh, well, forget that. It's just public money. We'll just bin it. And that was back in the day, 25 billion. Crazy. Gary, wonderful to talk to you. Thank you. Brilliant call. Really appreciated it. 0344 499 1000 to join in the conversation this morning. Quick break, back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk and it's Petrie here with you as usual on a Thursday early morning. We're talking about the NHS and really wondering if it can survive in its current form. I mean, there's so much about it that they seem to be working against the odds, I think, of the sort of the patient-facing staff. I've never really had any problems with. I think they're all wonderful. I mean, they're not sainted or anything, but they're great professionals, and I appreciate them very much. But there's so much wrong with the systems and the background and the managers and procurement and all of those things, which I would have thought would be relatively easy to solve. You just centralise procurement, right? You've got a massive procurement budget. You need to buy, I don't know, 5 billion needles. You're going to get them cheaper than if one trust is buying 500,000, another trust is buying 750,000, and they're having to pay whatever prices they're paying. If you're buying 5 billion syringes and needles, the economy of scale alone would reduce the price of said syringe. I mean, that makes logical sense to me. I don't know why they don't centralise procurement. It doesn't. It's stupid. It's just stupid. Kate is in the Highlands. Hello, Kate.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. First time caller. Thank you so much for picking up the phone.
I'm kind of incensed about can the NHS survive. I left the Highlands many decades ago to go to Glasgow to nurse, and at the time when matrons walked the wards, and you shivered in your shoes that she would speak to you, because if she did speak to you, something was wrong.
You were in trouble, yeah.
I was in trouble, and you immediately sorted that. I'm afraid the NHS, I don't think, can survive because in the 70s, Mrs. Thatcher decided that she was going to make NHS a trust status. And what did that mean? That meant that you had boards, you had people on boards who had perhaps maybe 3 or 4 months of a year where they sat and made decisions. Lots of chiefs meant lots of money, and where did the money go? It did not go to the Indians like me on the wards.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. When it was decided they were going to decentralise the whole of the NHS and set up all these trusts around the country, it's just another layer of government, isn't it? It's just another layer of management. It's just another layer of cost. And that's what we've seen.
But that's not what it's supposed to be. No. It's not supposed to be government and management. It's supposed to be the NHS for those that couldn't, initially set up by an Iron Bevan, to help those who couldn't afford to have health care.
Yeah, even basic health care. They couldn't afford to go to to their doctor or anything. But how do we fix this, Kate? Because I think that we can agree that setting up all these individual trusts has not worked, right? It just hasn't. It's made a mess of different computer systems and different work practices and all sorts of different things. But how do we return it? And we don't want it to be back in government hands either, because they couldn't run a bath.
How do we fix it? I would ask every individual person in this country, Scotland, England, Ireland, Wales, who pay tax, just take 1 year, please take 1 year to spend £5 per. In Scotland, we're very, very fortunate that we get free prescriptions, we get free traffic, etc., etc. Just spend 1 year of each saying, I'm going to spend £5-10 for this 1 year only. That must, I'm sure, contribute billions towards the health service.
But money doesn't, I mean, look, it's never going to have enough money, right, because of the various situations with society at the moment. But throwing money at it doesn't fix it. It just gives it more money to waste.
But we're talking about the fact that the A&Es are overrun. The ambulance service is overrun. We don't have enough individuals. We don't have enough personnel. If there's enough money just take 1 year to contribute billions to staff ambulances, to staff A&Es, to staff hospitals. I would also think that what I really think would be a really, really good idea would be any doctor who is now, going through this system and graduating and coming through, there's got to be something that says, I'm going to give 5 years to the NHS.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Thank you. I can then go and say, I'm going to go half of my time will be private, half of my time will be NHS. But just take the 5 years and it'll roll over. Every year will roll over and you'll have all these NHS doctors coming into the system.
Yeah, because at the moment they'll pay their university fees, but it costs us about £200,000 or £300,000 to train a single junior doctor, right? Because of all the ward time that they spend and all of that, it costs the country about £300,000. That's my understanding. But you've got a doctor who qualifies and can immediately go and work in Australia. So I agree with you that they need to repay us, that they need to be
just for a few years.
Yeah.
Just 2 or 3 years, 4 years, whatever it is, just pay it back. Isn't that a good thing to say?
Yeah, I would agree with that, although there are so many, believe it or not, anti-slavery laws that would prohibit that from happening. Although businesses do it, don't they? If they pay for somebody to graduate through university, they say, we'll pay for your university degree if you give us 3 years. So maybe there is a way of doing it, but they'd have to agree to do that. But, a lot of people listening, Kate, will say, look, we already pay a lot in tax towards the NHS. We already pay national insurance. We already pay, the idea that we should just donate a bit more money in 1 year, they will get used to that money and want it every year.
No, I think if it was the case of this is what it's going to be, if for 1 year we're going to raise billions of pounds, then I'd be absolutely. Unfortunately, I have a condition which it's not what I'm phoning for, but I have free prescriptions. But if I was to pay for those prescriptions per month, it would cost me, I don't know, £30-40. I'm only one individual. That times millions is a lot of money. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we pay for our prescriptions here, of course.
Well, we don't in Scotland.
I know, or in Wales. I don't think we do in Ireland either. But we do. We do, and it's nearly £10 a prescription. So yeah.
Well, I know. Just as a Scottish person with 3 prescriptions, I know I'd be happy to pay £5-10 if for a year. Because I know what you're saying. Are we really? Is that really going to address the situation? Can the NHS survive? It's a horrible thing to say. I just don't know if it can, because I just simply think that those at the top are constantly making decisions that filter down unbearably towards, those people, the nurses on the wards. Home helps are now, home carers are virtually gone.
Yeah. And that leads to this horrible phrase of bed blocking, because there's not enough social services to get people out of those beds and into their home. The whole system is crumbling. It's just not working. And I think part of that issue is we just keep chucking money at it and hoping that'll fix it without reform and without actually planning properly, and I think one of the biggest mistakes, Kate, was separating the cost of the NHS and social services, because now they fight between each other who's going to pay the bill, whereas if they were all under the same umbrella,
exactly,
then they would move patients from hospital beds into home help, because it would be under the same budget. But because it isn't, social services go, no, we haven't got the budget, and the NHS are left holding the baby.
It's such a sad situation all round, because the fact is I left here as an 18-year-old to nurse in Glasgow under the old system, as I would call it, and where people... if they were in hospital, they were treated as individuals. There was always somebody there to help them, to look after them. Auxiliaries, even auxiliaries on the wards who put out the tea and cakes and, did the bed baths and what have you. That just seems to have gone. And I don't know if I've answered your question. Can the NHS survive? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm with you, Kate. I mean, I completely agree with a lot of what you said, and also I don't know either, but I suspect not if there isn't proper reform. I'm going to take a quick break, but I will be back in just a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi there, this is Talk and it's Petrie with you, and I'm here until 1 o'clock, and we're talking about the NHS and really asking if it can survive in its current form. Throwing money at it, we've been doing that for years, haven't we? And it doesn't seem to really be touching the sides. Now, either we need to throw hundreds of billions at it, or we need to reform it. It needs to change. So that's what I'm talking about this morning, and asking you about your experiences with the NHS, and whether you genuinely sit there and think, can it survive? And some of you may think, should it survive? I mean, I think it should. I certainly think that I've had a lifetime of free healthcare, and I would want people who, my son and his children, to also have a lifetime of free healthcare. So that's what I'm asking you this morning. Give me a call, 0344 499 1000. Grace is here in London. Hello, Grace. Good morning. Oh, good morning, Grace. Sorry, that was me. I put the wrong fader up.
Hi.
Hi. So what do you think about the NHS and survival?
I didn't quite catch all of the last caller's suggestion. Was she saying that we should each pay an extra £5 each year?
Just for 1 year, to get a lump sum of money in to basically, but maybe pay for a prescription.
I hate to be critical of her in any way, but that's not going to work. You wouldn't raise billions if everyone paid £5 each for a year. You would raise a fraction of a billion. Literally, that's the mathematics of it. It would be a fraction of a billion. It would be nothing compared to what the NHS is currently costing. I mean, when we go to see a GP, that costs the NHS in the vicinity of, I think, 40 quid for a GP appointment, so I understand.
Yeah, so, something like that. I think it probably evens out averagely about 60 quid.
If we each give £5 extra a year, that's plainly not going to touch the sides. An operation on the NHS is costing thousands, depending on what it is. It's depressing. I don't really know where all of it goes. Clearly, there are some areas where some of it's not being really well used. There is some bits of waste. There are some managers who are getting paid more than perhaps they should. I'm afraid one of the things that's really bothering me at the moment, and I'm not pointing fingers at anyone specifically, because everyone's different, and I know that medical professionals all have different views, and I've worked with doctors who are very opposed to the strikes, but seeing the strikes going on has made me really frustrated, particularly when they're consultants. And consultants, some of them, the other day, I know most of them don't feel this way, but some of them were talking about how they wanted to go on strike. And these are people earning six figures. And I just thought, when I saw that particular snippet of news the other day, although I've had similar things previously, I thought then the NHS isn't going to survive. Because if you have that much greed amongst a significant proportion of people, ultimately it won't work. And of course, unfortunately, that's not just a few doctors. That's across our society. There's more and more greed across our society, and that's what's causing lots of things to fall apart. That's why there's more shoplifting. That's why all sorts of different things are going wrong. That's why there are corporations who are taking advantage of people's instinct to eat rubbishy food and making people sick by promoting so much rubbishy food that more people are ill. There are corporations who are charging ridiculous amounts for various medications, and that's a problem for the NHS as well. Greed is going to pull the NHS apart, in my worried opinion.
I don't disagree with you, Grace. I mean, if you look at resident doctors, junior doctors, they had 22% pay rise last year. They've been offered 5.4% this year, which takes them up to 27.5%. My maths is brilliant, isn't it? 27.5%. Right, so it's nearly 30%. But they're saying no. That we wanted 35%. Some of them are calling for a 29% lift. As you said, the consultants are suggesting they'll come out on strike as well. As soon as they get if they do get the pay rise, because they'll be out on strike, they're looking at 6 months, which will cripple the NHS. Then nurses are going to go, well, where's mine?
Yeah.
And then everybody else goes, well, where's mine?
Yeah.
I want 20%. I want 30%. I want 40%.
I mean, I really wanted to be a doctor when I was growing up because I find anatomy fascinating, and I really wanted to do something useful to help humanity. And I got the right A levels and everything, but I didn't get a place at medical school. So obviously I'm just bitter about that. I don't think I am. I don't think I. But in all seriousness, it's a privilege. That there are very few places at medical school for all the people who want to do medicine.
True.
So these young people who've got these places at medical school, I get that they've worked flipping hard and they're doing something incredibly important. But they are fortunate in a sense to have got that opportunity that a lot of other people might have liked. And it's not only them who are responsible for saving lives, because they wouldn't be able to save those lives if it weren't for people who taught them when they were at school, who get crops out of fields so that they can eat food, who tarmac the roads and sweep the streets. All of society is valuable and important in one way or another, but some people seem to be motivated by wanting more money, and we need people to actually care about helping others.
I get it. I get it, and it's true, because you tend to think of medicine as vocational, right? That you're doing it because you want to do something. You do something good. It doesn't mean you should live in penury, right? You should get a decent wage, but it shouldn't be about enrichment. If that doesn't sound too woolly, but the people aren't. You don't go into medicine for the money. Unless you become a plastic surgeon.
I went on a pre-med day when I was a teenager to find out about medical school, and they had a presentation and they talked about the salaries that people can end up earning in different fields of medicine. And I remember when they got to the bit about how much you can earn in plastic surgery, and all these teenagers around me, my fellow young people at the time, were just, salivating over this, and I was horrified. It was so frustrating. It was so frustrating. Meanwhile, there are plenty of doctors who are working their socks off, not because they want money, but because they want to help people. And there are people around the world who could only dream of the healthcare that we have. There are charities like Mercy Ships, where some people who are trained healthcare professionals give up some of their time to go and help people in our world who have no healthcare. As much as our NHS is really struggling, still we have far more access to healthcare than a lot of the rest of humanity. We are really fortunate.
Imagine being in America. Imagine being in America. I mean, there's a friend of mine who's got a condition and gets the top grade medical insurance through work. Right, she works for a drug company, actually, drugs company, and in comms, and she, had a couple of heart attacks and was very seriously ill, and then the medical insurance said, okay, we'll they questioned her for a week after a heart attack, why did you have that and where did you have it, and it went on, and they tried to not pay out for the surgery she had to have and the care that she had to have in the hospital room, so after all of that, stress, and then they finally did that, but they said, we're not going to pay any of your ongoing drugs, and she'd be dead without the drugs. And the drugs, I think, were something like $30,000 a month. Luckily, the company that she works for makes that drug, so she gets it through her company. But if she didn't, she would be dead. It's as simple as that. Because the insurance company, which is the highest level of medical insurance, said they wouldn't pay for any ongoing medicine. We don't want to go anywhere near a model like that.
No. And I mean, I look at people in the poorest parts of our world, and I'm really excited by how if we donate towards healthcare for some of those people, it can really change their lives, and it can be incredibly low cost in terms of, comparing to how much things cost here.
Like very basic vaccines. Very there are mothers who will walk for 20 miles with their babies to get them vaccinated, and yet in West London they're going, oh no, I'm not going to vaccinate my child.
Oh, I know.
Okay,
yeah.
It's just ridiculous.
Well, not in this household in West London. I've had. My mother used to give infant vaccinations before she retired. I remember one of my infant vaccinations and feeling quite scared of the needle when I was small, but it was okay. I went for it anyway.
Yeah.
We forget how privileged we are, and that there are people elsewhere who'd be really grateful for what we have, but it's coming apart partly because of the greed of some people, and not just doctors, but evidently drug companies. And also, I think some of the health things that we suffer from are related to aspects of our society that we need to reconsider, such as the fact that we're quite isolated.
Yeah, I agree.
We know that lots of things are made worse by loneliness, and that's not. I'm not blaming anyone who is lonely. I'm sympathising, but lots of aspects of our society have contributed to people experiencing, mental ill health that can contribute to physical ill health.
Absolutely.
And we need to rethink
it's
those things.
systemic, isn't it? It's the whole of society. As I was saying, there's no point throwing money at poorer areas if poverty is what's leading people to being ill. Surely there's another way of fixing that so they don't get ill and then don't need the NHS as much, rather than just go, we're going to throw some money at the NHS in those areas and that'll fix the issue of poverty-related ill health. It just doesn't really make logical sense to me. Grace, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Really, genuinely lovely to talk to you. I'm going to take a quick break, but I'll be back in a moment to talk to Kevin.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi there, good morning. It's Talk and it's Petrie, and I'm here until the top of the hour, which gives us about 10 minutes together. Let's speak to Kevin now, who's in Hinckley. Morning, Kevin.
Morning, and how are you?
I'm very well indeed. Are you? I haven't spoken to you before, have I?
No, I'm usually on a bit earlier, but I've had a very long day on the roads today.
Oh, bless you.
I normally don't get on with you. I just normally finish it with Kev, and that's about it.
You don't like me? Oh.
Well, you're my second favourite at the minute. Julie is my favourite, if I'm honest. I love listening to Julie, but I don't know much about you, to be fair.
Oh.
I'm never usually on so late, but...
Well, I'm really glad that you've given me a chance. I think we'll get on famously, Kevin. I think we will. What do you think about the problems with the NHS? Is money going to fix it?
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. Finish what you were saying.
I just said, do you think money's going to fix it?
No. Well, do you know, firstly, I'll say this. Your previous caller has nailed a lot of points that I actually was going to say. She's brilliant, whoever she was.
Grace, yeah, she's really good.
She was really good. The thing is, I don't want to say the cliche, as I said to your researcher, but you can chuck money at a problem, and it doesn't necessarily solve it unless it's spent correctly. You could give money to a bad businessman, for example, and it doesn't mean he's going to be successful.
Right.
I just think I know this is controversial, so I'm going to say, basically, I obviously would love somehow the NHS to survive. Yeah. It's something that represents the UK on the planet, really, and other countries. You know, Obama even touched on the idea of it. I know I'm going back to it, but it is a real special thing. But
really, yeah.
And I don't really want to say this, but I don't think privatising it will be a terrible thing. Now, just hear me out, because there was another caller of yours earlier on that made a very good point. She was referring to dentists and,
vets, yeah, that have all gone.
Well, yeah, vets are ridiculous. I mean, and I know I have to go private for dentists. You know, I don't get NHS dentist, and it costs me a fortune. Yeah, it does. But
it's so expensive.
Well, of course it is. I mean, we thought you might think other dentists would keep their prices down, for example, or will charge a bit less. But there's that much demand, they can charge what they want, and they can all charge a fortune. I think the NHS would be slightly different. Just all I want to say, I just think if you look at other European countries and things like that, with the amount of people here, I don't want to move this on to another subject, but I think you can probably figure out what I'm saying. With the amount of people we've got here and the people that come here, with the way the system's set up, with effectively health tourism, just throwing money at a problem, the numbers are going to still keep going up, and it's almost like you're flushing money down the toilet, because the demand's getting thicker and faster before, and going back to what your previous callers was saying, is one of the negative sides of it, is the health insurance she was referring to, where some woman would be dead if she didn't have it. Well, I was kind of thinking, these people who work, pay tax, you'll all have insurance if you work for companies. And I, for example, can't get an appointment as a working class truck driver. I see all these adverts telling me to see my doctor. I'm in my mid-40s. See your doctor, have an MOT. I've got no chance. I don't even try. Oh, prostate this, prostate that. I don't even try. I've got things, I get aches and things, and I get a lump there, but it's not painful, so it don't feel too bad. And I just crack on. I'm doing 12 to 15 hours a day, working, paying my way, and I can't get an appointment. And I think if it was privatised, not that I want that, I must make that clear, if it was, I think it would at least put the people who work, and I know that sounds selfish, it would at least put people who work in a better chance of getting an appointment. Now, you straight away say, what about all those that don't work? Then that could be me. I could get an injury and I could be off work. I'm sure there are ways you would look into it. I haven't got all the answers.
But they have a similar system in... Right, let's just have a look at what you're saying. First of all, insurance, veterinary bills have gone up exponentially because of insurance, because they know that people who can afford, if you like, to pay higher bills. When veterinary insurance first started, the bills didn't change, but then very, very quickly the bills started to rise and rise and rise and rise and rise and rise and rise. And now you've got to pay 100 quid before you can even access your insurance, or it stops paying when your dog is a little bit older, or all of these things, right? Because they set the rules. If the insurance companies are in charge, they set the rules, and very quickly it becomes profit making for insurance companies instead of a benefit to a potential patient. And you see that in the United States, and what they've got there is they've got the two-tier system, if you like, but one of them is for those people who don't work on, so they get Medicare or Medicaid, but it's a very basic system. It's a very, very basic healthcare. You don't get any of the bells and whistles that people who are paying can afford. You've then got people who are working, and they get different tiers of insurance as well. So and those insurance companies have got algorithms to not pay out. So you had that insurance medical guy recently who was shot dead in New York. Do you remember? And he had just introduced, a CEO of an insurance company, he had just introduced a mechanism that was denying 92% of all claims.
Wow.
So this is the problem. If we go to an insurance-based system, it is therefore a profit-making system, as opposed to a system that is nothing to do with profit.
No, do you know what? That is it's a very fair point. To be fair, I can understand that. I'm not, like I said, I'm not saying I've got the answers, but I agree that it can't go on like this, and maybe something like the French model, which is a mixture of government pay and a little bit of own paying, might work. We need to look at different systems around Europe and see, because they're mostly social healthcare as well, but they don't have the NHS burden that we have. Well, yeah, this is it. I mean, and for example, if something has to be done, is kind of what I'm trying to say. Now, if you look at it now, you think, all right, you might get a real bad service. When you say, you refer to the American version, you get a real basic bad service if you're saying it's not working. What service are you getting now? be honest. I mean, let's be honest. This is like, I mean, I don't even feel I'm part. I don't even feel it exists. I say that I do get medication through the doctors. If I need medication, I don't speak to anyone. It's just on a repeat prescription.
Right. Yeah.
So you know that's basically as close to a doctor I'll get. I speak to them if I'm really desperate, because it's just so difficult. So it's like I'm getting this service you've just referred to. Right.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that. I do get it, and I get the frustrations as well that people like you who are working all the time. The GP appointments are not set up for people who work at the hours that you work. They're just not.
Exactly. That's a very good point as well.
Yeah.
I had to ring the 111 service not that long ago, to be fair, because of the hours I work, and but that's not really relevant. But but
it's just true though. It just isn't. It isn't working at the moment, and it will continue to fail people like you if there isn't reform. And that's what we need here. And maybe we do need to shake up the payment method a bit, but it can never be private insurance companies. I'm telling you, they are absolute. I was going to say a really rude word there, but they're very bad people.
Well, I took on everything you said, and actually your other callers, and I've actually been educated a little bit. And I think you know what you're saying is pretty fair. I'm just trying to come up with a solution, and I'm just trying not to shut other doors. But I'm not too clued up with the insurance in depth that you know it. It's
just woe betide. These people, they are absolute monsters. They don't care about you at all. They just want to make profit, and they spend a fortune in not paying out. They'd rather spend £1 million fighting you on your claim than give you your claim for 200 grand. That's the truth of them. Horrible people. Kevin, lovely to talk to you.
No worries, lovely talking to you. And I do some late days. I'll get on again if I can. If you got another good subject on, hopefully I can be a bit more elaborate with it.
You were great. No, you were great, Kevin. That's exactly what we want. It's all just about conversation and discussion, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. So thank you very much indeed. You take care, but do go and have a prostate exam, please, in the next sort of 10 years, because it can save your life. I've got a minute. Oh, I'm in that awkward place. Don't know what to do. I'll take Andrew quickly, just very quickly. I've literally got a minute, Andrew. I had to decide there. What do you think about the NHS?
Petrie, good morning.
Good morning.
Listen, there's too much middle management. It all started in the 80s, as well you know. And you've got more people walking around with clipboards and this and the other. I know you've got limited time to speak to me, but we all know what the issue is.